and drizzle, a slither of clear skies across Wales and northern parts of England, but hold on to a lot of cloud elsewhere. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, we start to see a band of heavy rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly wet and windy across Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud elsewhere, but we start to see some drier air coming up from the near continent. So across the southeast in particular, it will be turning colder with clear skies and a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So a cold but bright start across the southeast of England on Sunday morning, but that band of heavy rain will continue to slowly push in from the west, affecting parts of Scotland and then northern parts of England and parts of Wales without breaks of rain. In between, though, we will see some brighter skies, but temperatures generally around average. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British Giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 12 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of February. Pinch punch, first out of the month and all that stuff. This is the weekend on GB News. OK, the headlines today. Trump's trade war is about to begin. The new president is hitting Mexico, Canada and China with new sanctions on their goods being imported into the United States. Will it help their economy boom, or could it backfire? And is it coming here next? And another plane tragedy in the US as a small medical transport plane has crashed into several buildings in northeast Philadelphia. We'll have the latest on that breaking story throughout the show. Yeah, the royals in trouble. The Duke of York is once again in the headlines after new emails reveal he was in contact with US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein longer than he previously admitted. Can Prince Andrew's reputation sink any lower? Well, it's already down there with a snake's belly, isn't it? Let's be honest. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is The Weekend, and it starts right here and now. Hello. So, yeah, welcome to February. Congratulations, you made it through January, and God, wasn't that a long month. And today is officially in bulk. It's a pagan holiday, mainly around women, so that's why I'm here bothering you today. But it means basically it's celebrated from the 1st of February through to the 2nd of February, and it marks the start of the end of winter, which is a really nice thought, isn't it? Just hold on to that one. Spring is around the corner. Let me know what you think about that. In fact, let me know what you think about everything today, because this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know what you're thinking on all the stories we're discussing today, and we have got some real humdingers for you, and what you want to chat about, to be honest with you. Very easy. You just visit gbnews.com/your say and join in our conversation. Keeping me company, and I can hear your groans already. I know what you're going to say, but shush your mouth. Keeping me company this hour is journalist and writer Benjamin Butterworth and former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining me. But before we get stuck into today's stories, let's get those news headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It's just after midday. The top story this hour: a second body has been found near the River Dee in the search for two missing sisters in Aberdeen. Eliza and Henrietta Hoosey, both 32 years old, were last seen at Victoria Bridge on the 7th of January. The first body was recovered from the river on Friday morning, and the second, we now know, was found near the same location yesterday evening. Formal identification is yet to take place, but the family have been informed. Police say there are no apparent suspicious circumstances surrounding their disappearance, and inquiries are ongoing. A medical plane has crashed in a crowded Philadelphia neighbourhood in the United States, killing all 6 people on board, including, sadly, a young patient and her mother. The Jet Rescue Air ambulance erupted into a fireball just 30 seconds after takeoff, engulfing several homes in flames. An investigation is now underway and comes just days after a separate plane collided with a US Army helicopter near Washington, D.C. In that incident, 64 people died on board and 3 were killed on the helicopter. Metropolitan Police are deploying extra officers in London this afternoon as opposing protests over Tommy Robinson are set to clash. Robinson supporters will march from Waterloo Station to Whitehall, while anti-racism protesters head from Piccadilly to Trafalgar Square. Police say pedestrian access will be restricted and people should avoid the area if not involved. It comes as Robinson is now serving an 18-month prison sentence for breaching a High Court injunction. The Met Force says officers are prepared to intervene swiftly today if any disorder breaks out. Hamas and Israel have exchanged hostages and prisoners today in the 4th swap of a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, supporters were seen clapping and throwing their hands in the air as they watched the last of 3 hostages cross the border into Israel earlier. Meanwhile, in exchange, 182 Palestinian prisoners are expected to be freed today, some serving life sentences. The release comes as Gaza's Rafah crossing has reopened for the first time since May last year, allowing injured Palestinians into Egypt. Back here, the alcohol duty freeze is over and consumers are facing a double tax hit from today. Duties on alcohol rise by 3.6% in line with inflation, with wine and spirits now taxed based on strength. Distillers, though, warn that rising costs and taxes could lead to even fewer sales, hitting Treasury revenues. Labour is facing criticism for the move, with Reform UK saying it will leave a nasty taste in the mouth. Pubs have already struggled. Last year, 83% reported falling profits, while costs soared. AstraZeneca has pulled the plug on a planned £450 million investment in Merseyside after Labour failed to match the previous government's offer of support. The pharmaceutical giant says a reduced government grant and timing issues led to the decision, but the current site will remain open with no jobs at risk. It's a for Labour after the Chancellor, though, spent the week promoting Britain as a top spot for investment. The former Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has also warned the UK needs stronger vaccine manufacturing to prepare for future pandemics. Industry experts say the move sends the wrong message as the government shapes its industrial strategy. And family, friends and fans have turned out in Blackpool for the funeral of singer Linda Nolan today. As the funeral-topped casket was taken from the church, members of the public applauded outside the church. And along with her sisters, Linda was, of course, part of the pop group The Nolans, known for their hit I'm in the Mood for Dancing. She died at the age of 65, 2 decades after she was diagnosed with cancer. And in Linda's memory, donations are being raised for Trinity Hospice, continuing her legacy of hope and resilience. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. He's got his best running trainers on for me today. He's so fit, that boy. He goes to the gym every blooming day. He makes me feel very ashamed. OK, now, enough waffle. Let's get straight on to today's stories, because we've got the most amazing show for you. It's utterly, utterly packed with some very good stories, especially if you have daughters in your family. We've got a story you really don't want to miss. OK, let's get started, shall we? We're starting with President Trump, because why wouldn't we? He's confirmed his administration will impose tariffs on America's 3 biggest trading partners. Starting today, imports from Mexico and Canada will be hit with levies of 25%, while Chinese goods will face a tax of 10%, though some products like oil could be spared, obviously. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump hinted that Europe, or the EU specifically, could be next. Let's have a listen.
The European Union charges us 20% plus a VAT tax, called a VAT tax, very similar. And it costs us an absolute fortune. We are treated so badly, and we have a tremendous deficit with the European Union, so we'll be doing something very substantial.
Wow. Now, of course, we're not mentioned yet, and we're not part of the EU, so could Brexit actually be working in our favour? In any case, let's talk to political correspondent Anna Gross and find out what's going on here. Anna, thank you very much for joining us this morning. This is Donald Trump being Donald Trump, just making a decision and getting it done. Lots of people, lots of our viewers admire him for that. But trade wars never really are globally a good thing, are they?
Well, yeah, they obviously can have quite serious impacts on the flow of goods and can create bottlenecks. The other major issue, and this is also a concern for Trump, though he doesn't bring it up very often, is that if you impose trade tariffs on other countries, they're likely to respond. As you can see, President Trudeau has said in Canada already. That leads to the price of your own goods going up. And there's no country in the world right now that wants to see increased inflation. Not Trump in the US, certainly not Starmer here in the UK, and nor does Europe. So, I mean, that is a concern for any country when they're thinking about engaging in a trade war like this.
Now, the thing is, with Mexico have said we are willing to talk to Trump, we're going to sit down quietly and discuss this. Whereas, you know, Canada has hit back straight away and said, right, we're banning Tesla cars, or we're going to slap a huge tax on Tesla cars, which does strike me as being a little bit childish.
I don't know whether childish is probably not the word that I would describe. You know, I think Trump does respond to acts of power. He also responds to, self-interest and the interest of his country, which I think a lot of citizens are very grateful for. And I think, that is a calculation that Trudeau is making, that if Trump is then faced with, a headache for companies that are producing electric vehicles, that might actually make him change the equation.
I mean, imports from China, Mexico and Canada, that's almost half of US goods. And do you think this is just going to end up getting passed on to consumers? That's the bottom line here, isn't it? It costs all of us much more money.
I think ultimately, yes. That when you engage in trade wars, invariably, the price of goods does go up. It does lead to inflation, and it leads to inflation in lots of places that you might not expect.
But Anna, the big question, obviously, being very selfish, putting this country first, which a lot of our politicians don't seem to do these days, how is it going to affect us? I mean, Trump hasn't done anything with the EU yet, but he has hinted that that is coming next. Do you think he'll go through with that?
I think he is likely to go through with that. I do think that, you know, when you speak to British officials here, and, you know, Peter Mandelson, who's going to be the ambassador to the US, they do see, you know, that for the most part, they don't think that Brexit was good. They think it was very damaging to the economy, but they do see that there being a possible benefit here to the UK not being in the EU, because actually, especially, it's quite interesting. There's a difference in the data in the UK versus in the US on trade. But if you look at the US data, the stuff that they look at, they run a surplus of trade specifically with the UK, as in the US sells more goods, exports more goods to the UK than the UK sells to the US. And Trump has been explicit that he wants to impose tariffs where there is a deficit, where he thinks the US is kind of being taken for granted, or, you know, that other countries are benefiting more than the US. That does not apply, according to the US data, to the UK. So I think there is an opportunity here to say, look, we shouldn't be whacked with tariffs.
So it is good news for us, or do you think Trump will go back on this? Do you think he's in office, is going to prove to you know, the voters that I am Donald Trump, I'm going to do exactly what I want, I'm going to make America great again, to borrow his phrase? But do you think there's a chance that he will go back on this? I mean, the Mexican Prime Minister has said, you know, I want to talk to him and sort this problem out. Do you think there is a chance he'll go back on that?
My personal opinion with Trump is that he is not dogmatic. He's not going to just say, because I said something, we're going to do it. If the equation changes for him, if he sees it as in the US's interest to change his mind, whether it's Mexico, whether it's Canada, whether it's the EU, he will do that. And he'll make no qualms of it. But I think for the time being, the equation that he certainly has made is that it makes sense to impose tariffs on Canada, on Mexico, and on China. And I think he's made it pretty clear that he sees the benefit to imposing them on the EU too.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Anna. That is political correspondent Anna Gross. Thank you very much for joining us. OK, what do you make of this one, then? Well, first, let's see what our panel make of this. Journalist and writer Benjamin Butterworth, don't start, and former Conservative MP Neil Parish. Now, I'm going to come to you first, Benjamin. Lots of love in the room for you today already. Stop it, you lot. It's very important to get everyone's opinion on this show. That's what it's about. Benjamin, so what do you make of this? Is it a good move by Trump to start a trade war, basically?
No, I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. You know, this is not a new concept of tariffs. And if you look at the research, you'll struggle to find any country where their economy has grown faster and inflation has been lower because they've put tariffs on goods. And to do this to the three biggest trading partners, it strikes me as extraordinary, because one of the reasons Donald Trump won the election was because there was inflation that was relatively high in the US. Now, actually, globally, it was a lot less than places like the UK and Germany faced, but they were complaining about the price of eggs. Now, one of the consequences of putting tariffs on so many imports, cars being a particular one, and Americans love their cars, is that is inevitably going to push inflation up. It's going to reduce investment in businesses. And if people are buying fewer products, the government is taking less tax. So I struggle to see any of the argument. And I think, you know, when he says something, he does it. He's illustrating that. But I just wonder, in 12 months' time, when inflation is at 5%, higher than they've had it even in the last year or two, what are Americans going to make of him then?
This isn't actually a shock. He hinted he was going to do this before he was elected.
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump likes to throw a big boulder in the pond and have huge waves go across it. So he will introduce these tariffs. But I agree, I don't think they will last that long. I mean, half the oil and gas comes from Canada. So is he actually going to whack 25% on that so that they've got to pay 25% more for their fuel? No, he isn't. So therefore, that will be taken out. And all sorts of nuances will happen, because he was elected, because a lot of people in America who are struggling, voted for Trump because they thought they were going to get a better deal, food prices were going to be lower, all of these things are going to happen. You see, Mexico, a lot of fruit, avocados, all sorts of things come from Mexico into America. Now, if you put a 25% tariff on those, they automatically go up. And, of course, the people that voted for him will feel that first. And, of course, the one thing you wouldn't do in America is put up the price of gas, if you could help it, petrol, basically, because they love their cars and they love everything about them. And so I think, he did it to Colombia and they rolled over.
Yes.
But you know, being blunt, they weren't the trading partners. I mean, Canada must feel sore because basically they are, you know, America's their biggest trading partner. They've got, you know, hugely good relationship with America. You know, much as I dislike the Scottish nationalists, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, put a tariff on Scotland because we don't particularly like the Scottish, you see. And so, therefore, it really is the same sort of thing, really. And I think he will throw these pebbles in the pond, but I think the prices will start going up. Interesting with the EU, because he hates the EU, and so
it is mutual, isn't it? It's a mutual
exactly.
loathing,
They hate him, and so therefore, you see, he was talking about VAT. Now, VAT is a purchase tax, and don't forget, America has different purchase tax, I think, in different states across of America. But you know, he's obviously going to go for something around the 20% tariff. Again, I reckon he'll whack that on. Then he'll see if he can negotiate. But you see, he's had a soft target, basically, with Colombia. It's going to be interesting with these harder nuts to crack. And also, you know, Colombia, yes, it might affect coffee and a few other things, but it won't really affect prices in America. The problem he's doing now is he will affect the prices in America. And the final point I'd make is if we try to do a separate deal with Trump, it might work, but he'll want us to adopt American standards on food and all of these things, because as far as he's concerned, you just trade with America. If you dislike some of his, you know, chlorinated chicken or whatever,
all of the again?
Don't forget, I spent a lot of time talking about chlorinated chicken.
We all spent a lot of time talking about chicken.
That is an issue, and they'll just say, these are our standards, we chlorinate those chicken, they are safe to eat. The fact that they are reared under, you know, very poor conditions, that's why they need the chlorine to clean them up before we eat them, but they are still safe to eat. And so therefore,
to be fair, we don't have Americans keeling over because of eating chlorinated chicken.
You know, I mean, they may, you know, I mean, I can say this because I'm a fairly large person myself. I mean, they may eat a few too many calories in America, but, you know, as you quite rightly say, they don't die from eating it. But that will be the issue. Whenever you do a trade deal with America, he will be absolutely convinced that you do exactly as he trades.
Interesting. Benjamin, we're going to come back for you more later. We have to take a quick break. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story and more, please do go to our website, which is at gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and up next, Tony Blair is back again, this time supporting the use of digital identity cards. Could this be a good move or a disaster? Would you want one? This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
People living with obesity are people, and they deserve the right for treatment and care as much as anyone else. What we need to understand is that obesity is a chronic condition, or a disease, as some people call it. It's not a choice. And this is the bit that people really struggle with, is that people think this is a lifestyle choice and people have done this to themselves. What we now know is the science and the evidence shows us that this isn't a choice. People have genetic predispositions for living with obesity. What we need to do is be a bit more compassionate and caring to people that live with obesity and support them to make healthier choices, not actually just discriminate and tell them that they're doing something wrong when, you know, if I had asthma, for instance, you wouldn't be saying the same thing to me there. But then it's exactly the same.
Usually, if you're going for an operation of some form or other, there'll be often there is a criteria. So my mother, she had a knee operation. They wanted to make sure her blood pressure was right and all these things. This is, I mean, to hear somebody say that obesity isn't a choice just because you've got genetic predisposition to it, it's just exactly why people seem to be legitimizing being overweight. Ozempic has proved that people are overweight because they eat too much. Because Ozempic tells you to stop eating, it makes you think that you've eaten and makes you feel full, so you don't eat. You may be predisposed disposed to anything, but you also have a large percentage of responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. So absolutely, it is in the patient's best interests, because if you're overweight, it'll take you longer to heal. You're more likely to have complications, the same if you smoke, and also the outcomes are usually better. So for a smoker, if you quit, say, 4 weeks before surgery, you're 25%, your risk is lower of respiratory complications. So this is literally, of course, it's discriminatory, because you have to decide, you have to prioritise the people that are likely to survive the operations.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, we have got a cracking packed show for you, so I'm getting straight on with it. Tony Blair, you thought he'd gone 20 years ago, didn't you? Oh, no, he's back. He's now urging the government to introduce a national digital ID system to combat what he calls the spread of populism. Yeah. The former Labour Prime Minister has also issued support for recognition cameras to tackle illegal immigration, drive down crime and deal with benefit fraud. Now, if I remember rightly, Tony Blair did suggest this probably about 20 years ago, to be honest with you. But he thinks now it's a better idea. Benjamin, because we didn't have so much time to talk to you, keep awake, because we didn't have so much time to talk to you earlier on. I'm going to come to you first with this one. Now, Tony Blair, the Blair Institute, what do you make of what he said today?
Well, I mean, I really do think this shows that Tony Blair was right in 2006. He was ahead of the curve because many countries have ID cards now. And the fact is that this would clearly be a relevant tactic to solve illegal immigration, because one of the problems, one of the pull factors we have for people coming here is not just culture and language, which they might have in common, but it's the fact that they can get work, that there is a considerable black economy. There's been figures in recent weeks saying that there are something like 500,000 illegal immigrants in London, for example, one report found. Now, how are they surviving?
And that was probably an underestimate.
They're surviving because they can make money without it being on the radar. Now, a benefit of an ID card is that if someone's going up to, a Turkish barber's or a car wash or something, some of the places where it's suggested these people are making money, well, you could go and ask for the ID card, the officer can, and if they can't provide it, probably on the phone for most people is the suggestion, well, then you've immediately got a line of inquiry. It's far more straightforward to work out you're working illegally. At the moment, the amount of paperwork they would have to do to try and get that makes it much more difficult. And I would just add that since 2006, we've had the smartphone. I think it came in just after 2006, the first iPhone.
I'm still smarter than I am, to be honest.
And so you've got a situation now where pretty much, certainly for middle-aged and younger people, everything we do is tapping our phone.
So and
I think people are used to it.
This is basically a form of ID in any case. It knows where you are most of the time.
Exactly, and we've just reinvented the driver's licence so that people will have that on their phone. I think this is a step that would make very little difference to the average person in this day and age, but a significant difference to the state stopping people working illegally.
So you'll be happy to carry one?
Absolutely.
OK, how about you?
I think there's a sort of generational gap here somewhere.
I thought there might be here.
Because I think, everything's got to be done on the phone, everything's going to be done electronically. And I remember on ID cards many moons ago talking to Tom King, who was ex-Northern Ireland Secretary, about ID cards in those days. And he said, yes, of course, the ones that would have the really up-to-date ones would be the IRA, absolutely certain. And so, therefore, this idea that you're going to trade around with this blasted ID card and every illegal immigrant's going to be able to get a job is absolute nonsense, because, there'll be so much potential fraud fraud in it. And why on earth have we, all us, as older people and everybody in the country across the piece, why have we got to have ID cards? So therefore, because it will be a problem for illegal immigrants. And I just think it's another big brother just trying to dictate to us. And of course, sorry, but technology to technology to you guys is second nature. But to my generation and older, it's not. Some do it very well, others don't. And what you're doing all the time, if you're not careful, you're excluding the older generation all of the time. And I'm sorry, this whiz, 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 it all sounds lovely. And Tony Blair was whiz, whiz, whiz when he was in power. And he seems to be whiz, whiz, whiz now. But I don't think anybody's convinced by it.
Well, with due respect, that's an argument that simply says we shouldn't move forward. Just because there are some 80-year-olds for whom this would be more challenging doesn't mean that we shouldn't use the efficiencies that are out there. Take another, for example.
It's not just about
efficiency.
Not just the fact it's about it could be fraudulent. That's the difference.
How can it be fraudulent?
Of course it can be. There's no system, no electronic system yet, banking or anything else that is not actually capable of being got into. And so therefore, once you've got ID cards and it's all done electronically, I think you'll find there'll be a lot of abuse, and then you'll get people struggling on the other end trying to get the ID cards. And I think it's just not worth the risk.
I tell you what, the scale of abuse of our systems would be a lot less with ID cards than the mess that we've had for a long time now. And I'd point out that, we have passports in this country for which the amount of passport abuse is almost nil. It's extremely hard to replicate. So there is an example of something that works. And I'd point out, it's not just that you can go to the car wash and say to an unlikely-looking person, oh, you don't have your ID card. That shows that you're here illegally. But also we have a problem with benefit fraud. And so if your ID card is linked up to the benefits you're on, for example, like personal independence, but actually they're turning out and doing 12 hours at the nail salon on a job, well, that is immediately picked up. And the estimate is that could save £10 billion in fraud.
But the passport the passport is the wrong one to use, because that has got a huge system. You've got to have photographs. You've got to go through a whole process to get your passport. This is not saying that. This is all going to be done digitally. It's all going to be whiz, whiz, whiz. And I tell you, it will be fraudulent. I can promise you that. And there's lots of people in this country who do not share your enthusiasm for ID cards. They never have. It's just alien, but whether we like it or not, and Tony Blair tried it before, but it's alien to our culture, whether you like it or not. It may not be alien to your culture, but it is to many people in this country.
Because for most people now, when they pay for something, they tap their card, or chances are they tap their phone.
Your generation.
But it's still most of the country now. Middle-aged people, that's completely normal.
We're an ageing population.
Let's work out how many young people there are compared to older people. In fact, there's more older people than there are younger ones, because that's going to be a huge problem with our pensions in a minute. But, seriously, you can't say that there's more young people than there are older people. And so why have we got to adopt everything? You can complain to me that I'm a Luddite. Perhaps I am.
Perhaps you are.
But why? Yeah, you can call me a Luddite. I don't mind. I'll take it as a compliment. But seriously, why should everybody change because your generation decides that you can whack your phone on everything, you can pay for everything on your phone, you don't have to even have a credit card now, and then wait until the whole damn thing is broken into, and then you'll pay, right? And the rest of us will pay.
It's not a constructive argument, because all it's saying is there could be an element of fraud.
Benjamin.
But it's not, because, actually, a lot of shops, for example, don't like to have cash because someone could break in and burgle them, and now that doesn't happen. So, there are frauds in all sorts of scenarios. The fact is that when you have billions of pounds lost to the state, lost to British workers because there are people working here illegally, when you have billions of pounds lost to benefit fraud, the idea that you can just have a card, you don't even have to have it, you can carry it on your phone and just tap it, and that can cut out that kind of risk. That is a level of fraud, a level of abuse of the system that is enormous.
But
the majority of people in this country today are used to tapping and showing forms of ID in every hour of their daily life in a way that was not normal 20 years ago. And I don't think just because some people would find it more difficult is an argument that we shouldn't move forward.
I think you'll find that they're still open to fraud, and I think you'll find your generation will argue all all the time. I mean, for instance, we still don't do online banking because we feel there's a risk to it. And there's quite a lot of people who do still in that position. And like I said, Luddite or not, there is a fraud issue. And so therefore, I think before this is adopted, you've got to look at everything and not just decide because your particular generation love it because you want to whack it on your phone and everything else, because we do not need ID cards. It's another form of Big Brother. It's another form of making sure that the state... I know this government wants to entirely control us. The state. I mean, one of the points that Tony Blair made was it will control populism, wasn't it? What on earth does that mean? Does that mean that because I'm not a socialist, because I'm not Labour, I am a populist, am I? And so therefore, when I've got this card, I'm going to be targeted. I mean, what on earth did Tony Blair put that in for?
Seconds out, used to. Blimey. Well, I didn't expect that to go down that particular rabbit hole. Whose side are you on? There's a big generation gap going on here, isn't there? gbnews.com/you'll say, let me know what you think on that one. But I think Grumpy Grandad, you've actually nailed it. Afternoon, Grumpy. Grumpy points out, Blair, it was all his fault that all the illegal migrants are here in the first place. It's his fault we can't get rid of people, not to mention he dragged us into a war for no good reason. That led to ISIS, and we know how Blair should be up for war crimes, not still interfering in our politics like he is. A good point. And Tommy says, I grew up with an ID card, but I'm against a digital version. It's a slippery slope to restriction of our reforms. Well, let me know what you think. Yeah, please do. Save me from these two. I need it. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Coming up, we get the lowdown on the Six Nations after Wales suffer one of the worst defeats in modern rugby history. Ouch. But first, let's get those news with Francis.
Dawn, thank you. Very good afternoon to you. It's just after 12:30. The top story, Donald Trump is set to impose tariffs on the US's top 3 trade partners today, with Mexico and Canada facing a 25% tax and Chinese imports hit with a 10% levy. The move is expected to raise prices and could disrupt key sectors including energy, automotive, lumber and agriculture. The White House insists the tariffs are aimed at tackling illegal fentanyl distribution and addressing migration concerns. But in response, Canada, Mexico and China have all pledged retaliation. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has warned the European Union could soon face similar measures. A medical plane has crashed in a crowded Philadelphia neighbourhood, killing all 6 people on board, including, sadly, a young patient and her mother. The jet rescue air ambulance erupted into a fireball just 30 seconds after takeoff, engulfing several homes in flames. An investigation is now underway, and it comes just days after a plane collided with a US Army helicopter near Washington, D.C., killing 64 people on the plane and 3 on that helicopter. Here, the Met Police have deployed extra officers in London as opposing protests over Trump Tommy Robinson are clashing this afternoon. Robinson supporters are marching from Waterloo Station to Whitehall, while anti-racism protesters head from Piccadilly to Trafalgar Square. Police say pedestrian access will be restricted and people should avoid the area if not involved. It comes as Robinson is currently serving an 18-month prison sentence for breaching a High Court injunction. The Met says officers are prepared to intervene swiftly if disorder breaks out. A second body has been found near the River Dee in the search for 2 missing sisters in Aberdeen. Eliza and Henrietta Hussey, both 32 years old, were last seen near Victoria Bridge on the 7th of January. The first body was recovered from the river on Friday morning, with the second found near the same location that evening. Formal identification is yet to take place, but the family has been informed. Police say there are no apparent suspicious circumstances and inquiries are ongoing. And Hamas and Israel are exchanging hostages and prisoners today in the 4th swap of a fragile ceasefire in Gaza. In Tel Aviv earlier, supporters were seen clapping and throwing their hands in the air as they watched the last of 3 hostages cross the border into Israel. Meanwhile, in exchange, 182 Palestinian prisoners are expected to be freed. So far, 25 have been seen arriving in the West Bank on buses from Israel. The release comes as Gaza's Rafah crossing has reopened for the first time, allowing injured Palestinians into Egypt. Those are the latest headlines. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at the top of the hour, and Dawn will be back with you after this.
For the very latest GB News direct smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. This weekend is going to be often cloudy for many, rain at times in the northwest, but we will see occasional brighter spells coming through. We have a ridge of higher pressure towards the south that brings settled conditions, but across the northwest, a squeeze in the isobars and some frontal systems as well. So through the rest of the afternoon, then we hold on to this blanket of cloud across central parts of England towards the southeast as well. Could be thick enough for some patchy drizzle at times. Across Northern Ireland and Scotland, cloudy here with some light rain and drizzle, but in between there will be a slither of sunshine across Wales and Northern England. Otherwise, temperatures generally around average, but chilly underneath the low cloud. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, you can see some frontal systems out towards the west, but across Scotland tonight, holding on to cloudy skies, still with some rain at times and some gales, especially across the Outer Hebrides. A murky picture across Northern Ireland as well, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. A slither of clear skies across Wales and northern parts of England, but hold on to a lot of cloud elsewhere. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, we start to see this band of heavy rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly wet and windy across Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud elsewhere, but we start to see some drier air coming up from the near continent. So across the southeast in particular, it will be turning colder with clear skies and a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So a cold but bright start across the southeast of England on Sunday morning, but that band of heavy rain will continue to slowly push in from the west, affecting parts of Scotland and then northern parts of England and parts of Wales with outbreaks of rain. In between though, we will see some brighter skies, but temperatures generally around average. Bye-bye.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hello, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, it was a disastrous start in the Six Nations for Wales after they suffered a record 43-0 loss against France, marking the first time in 25 years that the home nation failed to score a point during a tournament game. Aidan McGee is thankfully here to explain all about this game, because to me it's just a game for men with odd-shaped balls. I'm a football girl, I don't understand rugby. And I did just say that out loud, and I don't care. Aidan, what's going on?
Well, look, it was always a tough order for Wales to go to France last night, to the Stade de France, a packed Stade de France as well, and beat a side who I would probably make them just slight favourites ahead of Ireland, which brings into focus just how tough it's going to be for England to start this tournament. Because today, 4:45 against Ireland in Dublin, and then they've got France next week. So given that they've lost out a couple of times recently to good sides but narrow margins of defeat, it's conceivable that England could give a good account of themselves in both matches but still be pointless come the third match. Now, it's a different time for England because they've got a new captain, Mauro Itoje. They've got Steve Borthwick's in his third tournament. He needs to do something in this one, really, because England... I mean, we don't talk about rugby as much as we used to. I mean,
No.
it seems like two generations ago.
Wilkinson, that's about my...
Well, look, there are structural issues within rugby. I mean, the actual league, the domestic competition, just isn't up to the standard of the international event, because I mean, who'd have thought that there'd be problems with fitness and conditioning for the level of international?
Oh, really?
Yeah, there is. They're not providing players who are fit enough and up to speed for international rugby, which I just find absolutely astonishing, given that it's a professional organisation. They have these antiquated laws as well, or the rules within the sport, where if you're an England player but you play in France, they make it very difficult for you to play in the national side. Can you imagine England doing that? England football team doing that, having players overseas not being eligible to play for the national team? They need to move on from that kind of stuff. It's 30 years this year since the sport went professional. Nonetheless, England have a fighting chance of making an impression. I don't think they're going to win it. That Scotland are going to be a problem because they've lost the last 4 matches against Scotland. Scotland are action today against Italy as well. But as for Wales last night, a crushing defeat. The first time that is ever that a Six Nations team has ever failed to register a point on the board in the course of a match. That means next week's match against Italy for them is absolutely pivotal, because I think it'll be a race between those two to avoid the wooden spoon.
The wooden spoon is for the one that comes...
Yes.
I'm learning.
You don't actually get a wooden spoon, though.
Right. Okay.
Unless you buy one yourself.
Well, at least I want the wooden spoon at the end of it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Can we talk about something I feel a bit more...
Yeah, sure.
with?
Marcus Rashford.
About West Ham. Football.
Yeah, Marcus Rashford. I mean, look, we understand he's in talks with Aston Villa.
Ooh.
So that's interesting, because it's not a club he would normally be flirting with. But Villa are in the Champions League, and they finished in the top 8. So that means
they're doing really well.
They're doing really well. They're 8th.
Not glamorous.
They're 8th in the Premier League, and there's a space there because this fellow John Duran, who they signed for £18 million a couple of years ago, moved to Saudi at the age of 21 yesterday for £71 million. Now, again, look at the direction of travel here. We used to think, well, up until 6 months ago, we thought Saudi were just going to take our older players who fancied an extra payday. This guy's 21. He's not even at his peak, and they're taking him.
Wow.
That's the way it's going to go. Anyone who thought that Saudi was just going to be content to just take the older players that we didn't want. What nonsense. They want to make a splash on the world stage, and sooner or later they're going to come for our very, very, very best players, and I don't think it's far away from now. But as for Marcus Rashford, apparently there's interest from Tottenham. He really wants to go to Barcelona, but the deadline day is Monday, 11 o'clock. Monday night, yeah, at 11 o'clock. Later than we've had in previous years, I would think, and I covered most of them for all those years in my previous job. But Barcelona would have to shift 2 players out in, 3 days to get that move to happen because of their cost restrictions in those leagues. I think he'll go to Villa.
Thank you very much, Aidan. That's Aidan McGee with an update on all your sport. And that transfer deadline day is not good if you happen to be a team. Hello, West Ham, who are playing on Monday night. You might be distracted.
It's a nightmare for them, isn't it?
We're playing Chelsea, though, as well, so it might distract them even more. Not. Thanks very much, Aidan. In any case, I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on today's show, including, now you don't want to miss this, especially if you've got daughters, the worrying crime stats coming out of Sweden. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
I'm really pleased to see this story. It's the news that bowel cancer screening, the age for that is going to be dropped from 60 to 50. And this is really, really important because bowel cancer is one of the biggest killers, and more people appear to be getting diagnosed with bowel cancer in their 50s. Not entirely clear why. And there was an inspirational woman called Deborah James who I actually met when I used to be the Shadow Health Secretary, and I remember meeting her when she had her cancer diagnosis and supporting her campaign, and she sadly passed away a couple of years ago, but it was a phenomenal campaign, and I think did inspire the nation. And this is so important. So people in their 50s are going to be sent these kits in the post. And I suppose my plea is just do not ignore these kits because you can deal with cancer if you catch it early enough.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, this is not the most pleasant thing to do, and a lot of us aren't used to it and talking about it and whatever, but it's essential, obviously, to do.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And the other reason I wanted to sort of flag this is, I mean, we can sometimes make ourselves sort of pretty miserable looking at the newspapers, but this is undoubtedly a good initiative that the government have done this, and that campaigners have persuaded the government to do this. So, look, I just want to plea to everybody watching, if you get one of these kits, use it.
And, of course, I think it's really important within that to point out that this would not have helped Deborah, because Deborah was 40 when she died. And what's really important when you see stories like this is to pay attention to what your body is telling you. And if you have symptoms that are weird, it is important to go to your doctor and to talk about them and to take the tests.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Needham. I've just got to read this one message. Keep your messages coming in at gbnews.com/yoursay. I've just got to read this one message out. Where is it? It's from Diane. Hi, Diane. Happy February. Benji is talking out of his Butterworth again. He's got a fascia just like to... I think kiss is the word you've asterisked there, isn't it? I will pass that on, Benjamin. Honestly.
Thank you.
Look, the point of this show is divisions, is debating, is listening to all sides of the argument.
That's right,
it's all
exactly.
debate, not hate, right? OK, so lots of love in the room for young Benjamin here. OK,
Absolutely.
now we move on. We have lost control. That is the admission of Sweden's Prime Minister as the country becomes increasingly engulfed with organised and violent crime, a problem blamed on criminal gangs made up predominantly of first and second generation migrants. Here to tell us more is Special Investigations Editor at the Daily Mail, Sue Reed, and I'm really, really grateful that Sue's coming on today. Sue, thank you for joining us today. Sue, thank you so much for coming on. I read your report first thing this morning, and it's a brilliant report, but utterly horrifying. Can you tell us more about when you went to Sweden, what you discovered?
I was there last week, and just before I start, I must do something, which I know you may raise an eyebrow, but I came back to some very good news. I'm a granny for the first time.
Oh, brilliant,
and the
Sue.
little girl is called Mary Hope.
That is
we're
brilliant.
delighted with her, but hope is what we need, because in Sweden, believe me, there's very little hope. It was one of the... I've been there many times, but it couldn't be worse for the ordinary people. And when the Prime Minister says we are out of control, you'll notice he doesn't say why.
No.
The state has lost control because of the generosity of Sweden. I mean, Sweden in 2015, already a very, very giving country regarding refugees and asylum seekers, let in and invited in 163,000 people. 163,000 people, almost predominantly of an alien, alien or very different culture. And I'm afraid they are reaping the benefits, especially women and girls, the benefits in inverted commas.
So it's Sweden, according to your report, has gone from having one of the lowest levels of sex crime and rape in Europe to becoming literally the rape capital of Europe.
I think the rape levels are up with a few, up with South Africa, a few areas of the Caribbean. They're very, very high. It's fifth in the world. And, so this is a once Christian, totally Christian, liberal and good society.
And you interviewed some families who have suffered firsthand in this, including a lady called Claudia, who is an immigrant from Chile herself, and her story was particularly horrific, wasn't it?
Yeah, her story, it shattered her family. She's a very, very strong lady. Basically, the girlfriend, 14-year-old girlfriend of one of her sons, was raped by a Middle Eastern migrant who she met, as teenagers do, trying to buy a bootleg a bottle of vodka. He raped her. The three brothers or sons of Claudia and elder brothers of the boyfriend of the girl met him in a forest, enticed him there, I have to say, saying they wanted more vodka. The girl pretended she wanted the vodka. And in the commotion that ensued, he was left hanging on a tree, dead. I've interviewed the three boys, as well as Claudia, well, we're talking about retribution, aren't we? We're talking about vigilante retribution. So there is another side to this. I mean, it's a society that is completely and utterly broken.
And I mentioned that story because Claudia, the lady you interviewed, was an immigrant herself from Chile, as already mentioned. Yeah. So, you know, there are people that would say, Sue, reports like yours and even discussing this subject are encouraging division. They're almost racist by mentioning it. You're encouraging racial hatred and encouraging that division. What would you say to those people?
I would say they're entirely wrong. And unless we address the problem, we're never going to get rid of the problem. I mean, we have 250,000 children, girls here, who have been raped. And I believe it's more than 50 towns. I've written about this. I broke the story in 2010. It is happening here, and it is because you have a culture. The migrants are mainly of a culture, the Islamic culture, let's be straight, that has not got the same respect for women and girls.
There was another story that particularly I found very upsetting, and please, if you are of a nervous disposition, you might want to just pop out and make a cup of tea or something. A little girl called Luna, who was, I believe, 9 years old. Tell us what that story is about.
I interviewed her mum, and Luna was 9. She was leaving the school gates in a July day at 3 o'clock. Her mum was waiting for her at home, a 10-minute bike ride away in a very remote northern area of the Swedish Lapland. And she was somehow, nobody quite knows how, but the bike was thrown to one side. She was dragged into the woods by a 15-year-old Ethiopian migrant who'd only got residency the week before, and he stripped her, raped her, strangled her with her own shoelaces of her trainers, and she's now in a wheelchair for life. The family will never be the same again.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. This happened not in a big capital city, literally, as you say, literally almost on the
Swedish Lapland.
Yeah. It's just horrific. And obviously,
but what was interesting. But one thing that was interesting is Emily, the mum, said we never thought that, when we never thought that the mass migration was going to be a problem. We just never thought about it. And the politicians on the right wing of Swedish politics say that is the problem. It's being kept from the people, and that is why I say we must speak about it.
This is the thing, isn't it? I mean, notoriously liberal country like Sweden, the right-wing party, the more extreme right-wing party...
Liberal beyond liberal. And a very good country.
And just quickly, so we are running out of time, on Wednesday night, an anti-Islam campaigner, an atheist, sparked violent protests by burning a copy of the Quran. He was shot dead
he was
on the streets.
Murdered. Yeah. He's been murdered, yes. He was murdered on Wednesday night. A gang crept in through his roof as he was streaming videos to campaigners who support him, and they shot him dead, and the perpetrators have not yet been found.
Sue, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time, and an absolutely horrific report you've done for the Daily Mail that I urge you to read it. Sue Reed, thank you very much. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, but first, let's take a look at that weather for you. Hopefully it'll cheer you up a little bit.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsored weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be often cloudy for many of us this weekend, with heavy spells of rain across the northwest later, but brighter spells will come through at times. Looking at the bigger picture then, we have this area of higher pressure out towards the east. Across the north and west though, a squeeze in the ice bars here and spells of heavy rain. But through the rest of the afternoon, we hold on to this blanket of cloud across southern parts of England, central England and into Wales. Clearer skies developing across the southeast tonight, but out towards the west, turning wet and windy across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Generally mild here, but the chilly feel will be across the southeast, where we'll see a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So through Sunday morning, it is going to be a damp start across western parts of Scotland in particular, with some strong winds. Temperatures generally around 7 or 8 degrees by Sunday morning, but colder across the far south and east. A murky picture across parts of Northern Ireland, with outbreaks of rain moving into northern parts of England, into Wales and the southwest of England, but a cold and bright start across southeastern parts of England with a touch of frost. So we hold on to a good deal of sunshine across southern parts of England as we go through Sunday. This area of rain will gradually start easing, so it's still going to produce some light rain and drizzle at times across western parts of England and Wales, but turning brighter across Northern Ireland to end Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, temperatures actually holding out at around average for the time of year. So as we go through Sunday evening, this band of rain will still continue to slowly move its way south and eastwards, holding on to the clearest skies across the southeast of England once again to give a cold start to Monday morning. We'll start to see outbreaks of rain, then sinking its way south and eastwards, but on Wednesday, higher pressure builds. Bye-bye for now.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
A woman of 53 has believed for 18 months she was in an online relationship with Brad Pitt.
I think we're seeing pictures. So these are the pictures that she received that made her believe that she was in this relationship with Brad Pitt.
And you'll see that some of it is in hospital because the scammer was claiming that he was suffering from cancer. This was playing very much on her emotion. So this is a divorcee who lived in Mauritius. She'd received a £700,000 divorce settlement, or £650,000 divorce settlement, I should say, and £700,000 has been taken from her through this scam.
Yeah.
As she was becoming every time she became suspicious, the money was taken for payment of charges on gifts that she never received, and then hospital fees. There was lots of emotions being played into there. Now, as somebody, I'm a rom-com writer by trade, so I write romantic fiction. And one of the books I've written has actually been about somebody who did online dating, got herself into a whole heap of trouble. Not quite. She wasn't in a relationship with Brad Pitt, but she met somebody dodgy. So because I've written that book, I've met a lot of people who've come up to me and said, "Oh, it's happened to me."
It's scary in this digital age, isn't it?
They've lost 700, but somebody has tried it on. Somebody my question is, would a man go 18 months in a relationship online without seeing somebody and keep it going? Or is this feeding into this neediness of a particular demographic of a woman who that's better than anything else she got going on in her life, was what was being fed to her over the internet? I just find
and then maybe a little bit of her knew, but she kind of just suppressed it because she
was hoping it was Brad Pitt.
Her daughter apparently for a year was saying, this can't be true, come on, think about it. But she just fell for it. But I just wonder, what's right, it's a very sad story. She's obviously now getting a lot of hate and ridicule as well.
Because she's been on French TV and she's had a huge amount of pushback from it.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of February. I have no idea what happened to January either, but I'm glad it did and it's gone. This is the weekend on GB News. Your headlines. Trump's trade war is about to begin. The US president is hitting Mexico, Canada and China with new sanctions on their goods being imported into the United States. Will it help their economy boom? And will it happen here next? And another plane tragedy in the USA as a small medical transport plane has crashed in several buildings in northeast Philadelphia. We'll have the latest on that breaking story throughout the show for you. And yep, the Duke of York is once again in the headlines after new emails reveal he was in contact with US sex offender Jeffrey Epstein longer than he previously admitted. Can Prince Andrew's reputation sink any lower? Well, it's already a snake's belly. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. So thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. It is indeed the 1st of February. Congratulations, you made it through the first month of the year, which, let's face it, went on for ever and ever. And I hope you're stuck to your new resolutions. And if you did try January, congratulations, because some of us might not have done it. That's me. And this show is nothing without you and your views. That's what we're all here for. We're here for you. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today. Anything you want to chat about, and if you want to boast about doing Dry January or have a go at one of my panellists, feel free to do so. It's gbnews.com/yoursay and join in our conversation. And you knew what I meant when I said have a go at one of the panellists, didn't you? Because joining me this hour is everybody's favourite. It's journalist and writer Benjamin Butterworth. Woo! Let's hear it for Benji. Come on, let's hear it. And the former Conservative MP and self-confessed Luddite Neil Parish. But before we get stuck into today's stories, let's get those news headlines with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. 2 minutes past 1. We'll start this hour in the United States, where Donald Trump is set to impose tariffs on the United States' top 3 trade partners today, with Mexico and Canada facing a 25% tax and Chinese imports hit with a 10% levy. The move is expected to raise prices and disrupt key sectors, including energy, automotive and agriculture. The White House insists the tariffs are aimed at tackling illegal fentanyl distribution and addressing migration concerns. But in response, Canada, Mexico and China have all pledged retaliation. Meanwhile, Trump himself has warned the EU could soon face similar measures. And staying in the United States, a medical plane has crashed in a crowded Philadelphia neighbourhood, killing all 6 people on board, including a young patient and her mother. The Jet Rescue Air ambulance erupted into a fireball just 30 seconds after takeoff, engulfing several homes in flames. An investigation is underway with officials from the National Transportation Safety Board now on the scene. It comes just days after another plane collided with a US Army helicopter near Washington, D.C., killing 64 people on the plane and 3 on the helicopter. The Metropolitan Police have deployed extra officers in London this afternoon as opposing protests over Tommy Robinson are clashing. Robinson supporters have marched from Waterloo Station and are now heading to Whitehall, while anti-racism protesters head from Piccadilly to Trafalgar Square. Police say pedestrian access is restricted and are urging people to avoid the area if they're not involved. Robinson is currently serving an 18-month prison sentence for breaching a High Court injunction. The Met Police say that officers are prepared to intervene swiftly if any disorder breaks out. A second body has been found near the River Dee in the search for two missing sisters in Aberdeen. Eliza and Henrietta Hootsey, both aged 32, were last seen near Victoria Bridge on the 7th of January. The first body was recovered from the river on Friday morning, with the second found near the same location that evening. Formal identification is yet to take place, but the family have been informed. Police say there are no apparent suspicious circumstances and inquiries are ongoing. In the Middle East, Hamas and Israel have exchanged more hostages and prisoners today in the fourth swap of what is a very fragile ceasefire in Gaza. In Tel Aviv, supporters can be seen clapping and throwing their hands in the air as they earlier watched the last of 3 hostages cross the border into Israel. And that came as, in exchange, 182 Palestinian prisoners are expected to be freed. So far, 25 have arrived in the West Bank. And the releases come as Gaza's Rafah crossing has now reopened for the first time since May last year, allowing injured Palestinians into Egypt. And just before I hand you back to Dawn, family, friends and fans have turned out for the funeral of singer Linda Nolan today in Blackpool. As the floral-topped casket was taken from the church, members of the public outside applauded. And along with her sisters, Linda was, of course, part of the pop group The Nolans, known for their hit I'm in the Mood for Dancing. She died at the age of 65, 2 decades after she was first diagnosed with cancer. That's the news on GB News. I will be back with you very shortly. Now, though, straight over to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Sam. The very fit Sam France, who's currently running out of the studio in his trainers, probably going to go to the gym in the next 5 minutes as well. That's what he does. He's a very fit young man. In the fit sense, by the way. I don't mean that. Stop it, you mucky lot out there. I wouldn't do that. Any case, let's go to America, shall we? President Trump has confirmed his administration will impose tariffs on America's 3 biggest trading partners. Starting today, imports from Mexico and Canada will be hit with levies of 25%, while Chinese goods will face a tax of 10%. Though some products, it's not stupid, is he, like oil, could be spared. Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump hinted that Europe, or rather the European Union, could be next. Here's what he had to say.
The European Union charges us 20% plus a VAT tax, called a VAT tax, very similar, and it costs us an absolute fortune. We are treated so badly, and we have a tremendous deficit with the European Union, so we'll be doing something very substantial.
Fascinating, isn't it? Joining me now is Pablo Ohana, a political advisor based in New York. Pablo, thank you very much for joining us. Now, a lot of our viewers are today going, this is Trump putting America first. What do you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, I don't think anyone could argue with that. But as is often the case with Trump, almost always the case with Trump, the real reasons beneath that are often a little more concerning. I mean, no one can argue with the aim of, reducing illegal immigration or tackling the drug crisis, these kinds of issues. But, the real reason behind these tariffs, we know Trump has had a problem with Mexico for a long time. He's accused them of being rapists and murderers. And, Mexico is a transit point for the drugs that he talks about. But, the majority of fentanyl entering the US doesn't actually originate from Mexico. So the concern that I have about targeting Mexico is with tariffs is that you're not actually addressing the root cause of the problem. And, the threats against the EU, for example, so Trump wants to argue that the EU imposes, barriers on importing US products and things like that. That may well be the case, but one of the root causes of that is that the EU has one of the highest, if not the highest, standards for health and safety in the world. Take their food, for example. The US permits over 10,000 chemicals and additives in everyday food products. Of those same 10,000, the EU approves under 300. So I totally get he's the president of the United States. America comes first. That is not surprising. But, you know, a lot of these issues, particularly with the EU, they're restricting many of these imports simply because they're just banned across the continent.
You know, the stock markets have fallen for an announcement, but the value of the dollar has jumped. So far, the financial reaction seems quite positive.
Yeah, I mean, time will tell, and you know there are issues with all of these trade tariffs, and time will tell whether this works out. But trade wars very rarely result in anything useful for anyone. So you know, you may appear strong briefly, and he can say that he's delivered on some policies, but ill thought out policies often result to weak problems later on. So you know, time will tell on that, but I'm not sure that that's going to hold out for very long.
Can we gauge how it's going down in America at the moment with the American public? Are they thinking this is a good thing, or are they worried that, you know, as everyone is saying, inflation will be affected and it will be the consumer that ends up paying the costs?
There's a mix, of course. If you're a Trump supporter, great. He's delivered on policy. Of course, this is what they wanted. He promised to do this during the campaign. No one can argue that, you know, he isn't delivering on his promises. But I think there is definitely concern that prices will increase. And there is a reality that we live in a global world. This idea of kind of every country fending for themselves is not really the case. You know, it isn't the case in the UK. It isn't the case in the US. Obviously, economies in each country are completely different. But ultimately, we live in a global world where people trade and import and export and all these kinds of things, that we don't live in this kind of insular world, no matter how big or strong the economy of a country is. So there is some concern, you know, if you're sort of slightly leaning towards the left, maybe you're a Democrat support, you're very concerned about imports being taxed and, you know, the unfairness of certain borders and targeting certain countries. I mean, Canada, for example, isn't really the root cause of any of these problems. I think Trump just wants to start a fight with Canada in the same way that he would just wants to start a fight with the EU. So there is some legitimate concern for sure, and there is always a case to be made that you've got to tackle the drug crisis. Totally legit, right? But you know, America has had its issue with drugs for a very long time. And a lot of these issues started in the country.
To explain what you mean by that, I mean, Trump blames Canada and Mexico for the flow of drugs and migrants over the US border. Excuse me, that is why he is targeting both of those countries.
Right, but Trump can tariff Mexico, Canada, China, the EU, whatever, but he has to recognize that a lot of these issues, the drug and opioid epidemic has deep roots in the US, and a leading contributor to the drug crisis in the US has been the extraordinary overprescription and aggressive marketing of opioids, primarily OxyContin, which a lot, you know, that's kind of the main one people have heard of. That's an American pharmaceutical company. Hasn't really had any repercussions. You know, that the real border crisis with, you know, isn't really with Canada and the EU, it's between America and its own pharmaceutical industry. The healthcare system is broken. It's built for and by the wealthy. So you can slap tariffs on whatever you want, but if Trump really wants to fix this problem, he can start by fixing the American healthcare issue.
OK, we'll leave it on that one. Pablo, thank you very much. That's Pablo Ohana, a political advisor based in New York. Thank you very much. Benjamin, I'm going to come to you first on this one because I can. A lot of people are saying, the viewers are saying, look, Trump, at least, whether you even agree with him or disagree with him politically, he puts America first. He cares about America, unlike a lot of you are pointing out, unlike many of our politicians in this country.
Well, he's not putting America, pardon me, he's not putting America first because the average person, the average American, is going to see the products that are getting these tariffs go up in price. They're going to see a smaller flow of these things coming into the US. They're going to see less investment in business. And these tariffs are going to be hit back from the countries like Canada, like Mexico. It was easy with Colombia. It's not a particularly powerful country. There wasn't a huge amount of exchange beyond things like coffee.
Just to explain, Colombia caved in when Trump said, unless you take our migrants back.
Exactly, yeah. Whereas, I mean, Canada is a rich country, a powerful country. You know, its people do not want to be the 51st state of America, as he suggested. Now, there is no example in history, and if viewers want to correct me, go for it, they often do, of putting tariffs, going to a tariff war and having lower inflation and higher growth. And this is going to be a serious problem because why was Donald Trump elected? Well, one of the main practical reasons was the price of eggs. This became a talking point in the election. They were too expensive. And so if you're going to go to a trade war, you're going to put inflation up. Right now, Donald Trump can do anything in the world so far as he believes. in 6 months, in 12 months, I think people are going to be turning around and asking even tougher questions of why their groceries are more expensive, just as they did with Joe Biden.
Do you think, though, Neil, that Trump might go back on this? It's just sabre-rattling. This is what Trump does. He's making a grandstand. You know, maybe trying to sort of like get Canada and Mexico to do more of what he wants.
Yeah, Dawn, you've taken the words right out of my mouth. It is sabre-rattling, and he's put these massive tariffs on. Don't forget, he might get up tomorrow morning and reverse them, you know, and then out it'll go on social media. So, therefore, he's thrown the huge pebble. Now let's see what ripples. Let's see if we can get them to tighten up on some of the drugs and some of the borders. But, of course, in the end, it also means that to his voters, he is putting America first. But he will have to reverse it because it will cause inflation and it will hurt his people. But he will leave that in place for several months just to see what happens. And, of course, what he's doing, and you've got to admire him for that, love or hate him, is he did say all this in his election. You know, you can't accuse him of going and taxing and doing things like the Labour government did here that they didn't tell us about. But, you know, this is Trump telling us exactly what he was going to do, and he's doing it. And I'm putting America first. But as soon as it starts to hurt his people, he will reverse it. I'll almost, you know, bet my life on it.
Ice Cold Truth. Interesting name, Ice Cold. Mr. Ice Cold, probably, or probably Mrs. Trump's delivering on his promises. I wish we could say the same for Barmy Starmy. Starmer, I'm assuming you mean now. But that is a point, isn't it? I mean, and Neil's point is, like, Trump did mention the tariff situation before he was elected. Pretty much a lot of things Labour said in the manifesto, they've kind of gone back on.
I mean, with all due respect to the American public, I wonder how many of them had the faintest clue what tariffs meant and the consequences.
If you're American, gbnews.com/yourself.
Do be very careful. I can tell you haven't been elected, because if you'd been elected,
I can be honest,
you would not have said that, because you do not actually say your electorate don't understand what they're voting for, even if they've just voted you out. You have got to accept what they say.
I'm very sceptical that Americans understood the consequences of tariffs, because it's a very long time since a country like the US has been using this against countries it does lots of trading with, China, Mexico and Canada. You know, take, for example, the US and Canadian automobile industries are heavily integrated. Some parts in car building cross that border 8 times while cars are being built. 8 lots of 25% just destroys the market.
Make them very expensive.
Now, making of cars is a big industry in the US. They're massive consumers of it. The idea that you get into a tariff war with that is going to be a nightmare for the average American. So I don't believe that they understood that was going to happen. And the fact is that we should be afraid. We should hope. You said Canada, I don't forget who was on there, but you said Canada was childish because they are going to maybe stop the selling of Tesla cars. Well, we better hope that Justin Trudeau or maybe Mark Carney in a few weeks' time stands up to the US. Because if these countries don't stop this tariff war, it's going to be Britain next. And none of us are going to be praising Trump when we face big costs on our basics
as well. You see, as far as the American voter is concerned, they actually see very clearly that it is America first. And so they just link the tariffs to the fact that that makes imported product more expensive, and so therefore they can produce stuff in America better. All of this is all about, you know, protecting America. America is becoming a protectionist state, whether we like it or not. And Trump actually told that quite clearly to the Americans. And I actually think the Americans actually did understand it and believe it. Whether they'll like the consequences of it when it drives their prices up is another matter.
Okay,
but I think they did understand it.
OK, fine. I'm particularly interested to hear from you now if you are an American and if you're an older American, because Benjamin managed to upset older people earlier on as well. So if you're an old American, you're watching this show, please do get in touch and let us know what you think of Benjamin Butterworth's opinions, won't you? And for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, please do go to our website, which is gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, and in just a moment we'll look at whether supporting net zero is costing Labour more than money. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. We'll see you soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Lauren, let's start with this, shall we? How children's TV may be harming, not helping young minds.
Yeah, so this is an article in the Express today, a big double-page spread as a result of some new research in a new book that's coming out by a child psychologist, saying that children's television, and I think perhaps more importantly, the way that children consume television and video product now is perhaps not as healthy for them as we would hope it would be. And there's quite some distance from children's television of the past, of the sort of the Bagpuss and Clangers and Ivor the Engine era. And I think what's interesting about this is particularly the how children's television is consumed angle, because children are now put in front of screens significantly more often than they were, certainly when I think we were growing up. The content that they are consuming is not great for their brains and their learning and development, which Floella Benjamin of children's television fame is now leading a big crusade to say that some of this is really, really bad for children.
These days, they're not watching the TV that we all watched when we were growing up. They're not even watching GB News in the morning.
What are they thinking?
Would you believe it? But they are watching this absolute drivel all day long on YouTube, and because obviously all our TVs are now connected to the internet, or they're getting TikTok on their TV. It's not even, so they don't even necessarily have to have smartphones or iPads. They can just watch this stuff on TV, and it is rubbish. They are watching it and they're obsessed with it. Oh God, Skibbity Toilet or something. Have you heard of this?
No.
No? Well, you'll have viewers who have got who are parents of sort of 13-year-olds, and this Skibbity Toilet thing is, they're all obsessed with it, and this is a really annoying sort of theme tune or thing that they sing at you.
GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking... This is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Right, we've just been talking about Trump in America and how much he seems to love his country. So what would we do next? Oh, yeah, let's talk about how Keir Starmer's doing, shall we? Will the cost of net zero eventually cost Sir Keir Starmer his power? The UK's chief climate advisor has warned the Prime Minister unless the cost of his green initiative are shared fairly with the public, the public will turn on the policy. The Chancellor has already been accused of turning her back on net zero priorities by supporting the expansion of Heathrow Airport. So that's Rachel Reeves for you. This is the same Rachel Reeves who, not that long ago in opposition, opposed the development of Leeds, or the expansion of Leeds Bradford. And obviously Keir Starmer, who was in opposition, opposed the expansion of Heathrow. Hypocrisy? Look it up in the dictionary, why don't you? OK, well, I've still got my panel with me. Despite your best attempts to get rid of Benjamin, I'm keeping it. I'm sorry, I think he's good fun. Benjamin Butterworth and Neil Parish. Neil, now, is the problem with... What is the problem with Labour? I mean, is it net zero? Is it everything else? What is it?
I mean, I think when it comes to Heathrow, that is total hypocrisy. And, of course, it's a difference between being in government and being in opposition. Because when you're in opposition, we would do it differently. How dare the government have a third runway, blah, blah, blah. Then when you come into government, you've actually got to take the overall, economy into being. But what I do also find ironic is that you've had Rachel Reeves, who produced a budget, and we can argue about the budget all day, but the one thing you can be certain of, all the pundits agree, the one thing that budget won't do is bring growth. And so, therefore, after actually taxing all private business, taxing the farmers, taxing everybody, let's now go for growth. And so, all of a sudden, Heathrow Airport is going to be growth. Now, yes, it will be growth in the long run, but it's not going to be short-term, and therefore, and all of a sudden we've got cleaner planes and we've got cleaner fuel, and so this is the argument for and by the way, I'm actually in favour of Heathrow Terminal 3, the third runway, but I always was, if you see what I mean. I was. You can look at my record in Parliament. So therefore, at least I'm sticking to my guns, and there's arguments for and against it. I get all that, and I think there is a long-term argument for it. But I think the problem this government's got is that everything it's doing in the short term is actually going to shrink the economy, and then they're looking to sort of building more houses, doing all these things which are laudable, but they will take time. And I'm just very worried what's going to happen to jobs, what's going to happen to business in that interim period, because I rather fear that she won't get the number of taxes she wants in, and in the spring now she's going to start taxing again. And if she does that, it'll be fatal, because all you're doing is shrinking the private sector economy, trying to grow the public sector economy, but it's got to be paid for. And that's the problem.
I mean, Benjamin, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, no one ever has actually gone for growth, an economy by taxing businesses.
Well, that's not quite right, is it?
Oh, is it? I don't know.
Well, no.
I haven't got an economics degree, have you?
But I have. I went to the London School of Economics. That was a bad one. But if you look at countries like Denmark and Sweden, they have a higher tax take, a bigger state, and the quality of living, the quality of public services, the average salaries, the growth in their economy is higher than the United Kingdom. But there are examples of countries with a higher tax burden that have a better quality of life for their citizens.
It's like taxing businesses in particular is not a way to grow the economy. Come on, you've got the economics degree.
Well, I went to the London School of Economics. I'd actually did economic history.
Did you...
Government and economic history. So.
Oh, gee. Look, do you want to be a Labour MP at one point?
The fact is, well, not at the moment, no. It's a tough job that they've got because of the mess that Neil and his gang left.
The black hole, Neil.
And the truth is that actually one of the big problems we have at the moment, for example, is millions of people on benefits, economically inactive, and getting the NHS back on its feet could have a big effect on lots of those people being able to get back to work. So that's why spending billions of pounds on the NHS is a rational thing for the economy to do to get workers back in. But, if you look at what's going on, the FTSE reached its highest ever value this week. The survey at the beginning of the year said most businesses expect to have a better year this year than before. Wage growth is up for the average person. So there are lots of positive indicators.
You seem to be talking to completely different people than I am, because I'm talking to a lot of private businesses, a lot of pubs and all sorts of people, and every one of them is actually talking about having less employees, not more employees. They're terribly worried about the national insurance that, it's hitting them. It will reduce the number of jobs, and it will reduce the amount of take. And then what will happen is Rachel Reeves will come back in March and say, I haven't got enough tax, so I'll tax again, and it'll shrink further. I have, irrespective of that, I'm not Labour, I have never seen a government come into power and actually, first of all, they frighten everybody to death because, yes, there were some problems left by the last Tories, I'll be first to admit it, but it was nowhere near as bad as they made it out to be. And so an economy needs to grow, and it needs to have confidence. People need to have confidence to invest. All that Keir Starmer and the Chancellor did when they got in is they rubbished everything, and everybody got frit, as Margaret Thatcher used to say, and they stopped investing. And that is the issue for you, and you're not going to get out of it by just going on spending, because we were spending a lot of money on the National Health Service. I remember the number of times that Starmer and co voted against the increases on the health service that we actually put. We put a lot of money into the health service. We didn't get it to where we needed it, but the idea that you're just going to pour money into the health service that you've either borrowed or taxed for and shrunk your private sector economy, it just doesn't work.
I'm afraid that, you know, anyone that's had a home and they've not looked after it knows that once it falls apart, it's going to cost you a lot more to fix. And that is the nature of the country. You have to have a big upfront investment. Otherwise, things like the NHS, things like schooling are going to fall apart continually. And that has a massive effect on the economy in reality. But let's just point out, by the way, when George Osborne came into office, he upped VAT to 20%. When Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, he upped national insurance on employers to pay for, supposedly, for elder care. So, you know, Tory governments did much the same behaviour in order to try and resolve this. And what Labour is doing, building the third runway, I don't want a third runway, I want a fourth and a fifth. It's absolutely essential. Heathrow is a global hub. A considerable proportion of flights to Heathrow are actually just passing through, and we get the money and the benefit from that. The fact that you've got the Oxford-Cambridge arc, two of the most highly skilled cities on earth, and in 2021, the Tory government turned down a motorway going through them and making that a growth area. That's insane. As Andrew Neil wrote in the Daily Mail, the thing about everything Rachel Reeves has just done is it shows the failure of the Tories, because they know full well they had 20 years to do it.
North-south divide. I'm not against what's going to happen in Cambridgeshire, and I'm not against, as I said, I've always been in favour of an extra runway. But the whole idea that, you know, you can sort of try and rebalance the economy, that won't work. And also, all of this takes far too long. And what you are not going to do is get from A to B by spinning all this, spinning all this growth that's going to take years to happen in order to actually plug the hole in the finances.
I tell you what,
it won't work, and you are shrinking the economy, and not only have you, you know, whatever position you took on, you've actually made the situation worse, not better. And I don't know anybody I've come across on virtually in any political party that actually argues that this budget was for growth, because it wasn't, and they are all very, very worried about what's going to happen to the economy in the future. And I just really think, you know, it's time for a total rethink and actually let the private sector, you know, this will be interesting to see in America, where Trump will actually roll back the taxes and the economy will grow. It'll be interesting to see.
The reason we've been stagnant is because we have failed to build the infrastructure and give planning permission to developments, huge developments like the one that will now happen across Oxford and Cambridge. We've got a problem that it's been so hard to get housing built that house prices have gone through the roof, and anyone under 40 has hardly any disposable income left after their housing costs, which often are rent, not mortgage. That strangles economy. That is a tax, effectively, because people have no control over spending it. I think Rachel Reeves will be a landmark chancellor, one of the best this country has ever seen, because what the Tories didn't do in 14 years, they failed on the runway because they were too scared of losing a few votes in the constituency. They failed on the planning permission because they were too scared that some boomers wouldn't still vote for them. Rachel Reeves has fixed that in month 7. Imagine what she can do in 5 years.
We were the ones that built many roads, all and you know, all the hassle over HS2 and others, right?
Build
virtually,
HS3.
Virtually all that we did was opposed by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party all the time we were trying to do it. And so, therefore, don't give me this rubbish about how all of a sudden they've been converted on the road to Damascus, because you haven't. Because all through opposition, you were in a completely different position. And now Rachel Reeves won't be the best Chancellor we've ever had. She'll be about the worst.
OK, I'm going to leave it on that note, actually. Thank you very much. And that debate, by the way, if you're interested, was all about how well Keir Starmer's doing. But a lot of you are agreeing with John, who's messaged in our thumbs up if you think we need a leader like Donald Trump who will put British people above everything else in this country. Lots of you agreeing with that sentiment, and maybe Keir Starmer isn't the man for the job. What do you think? gbnews.com/your say. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. Coming up, a story that scares the life out of me. An astronaut on the International Space Station. She spent so long in space, she's forgotten how to walk. Ooh. Why has she been forgotten by NASA? Let's find out more about that one. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. This weekend is going to be often cloudy for many, rain at times in the northwest, but we will see occasional brighter spells coming through. We have a ridge of higher pressure towards the south that brings settled conditions, but across the northwest, a squeeze in the isobars and some frontal systems as well. So through the rest of the afternoon, then we hold on to this blanket of cloud across central parts of England towards the southeast as well. Could be thick enough for some patchy drizzle at times. Across Northern Ireland and Scotland, cloudy here with some light rain and drizzle, but in between there will be a slither of sunshine across Wales and Northern England. Otherwise, temperatures generally around average, but chilly underneath the low cloud. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, you can see some frontal systems out towards the west, but across Scotland tonight, holding on to cloudy skies, still with some rain at times and some gales, especially across the Outer Hebrides. A murky picture across Northern Ireland as well, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. A slither of clear skies across Wales and northern parts of England, but hold on to a lot of cloud elsewhere. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, we start to see this band of heavy rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly wet and windy across Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud elsewhere, but we start to see some drier air coming up from the near continent. So across the southeast in particular, it will be turning colder with clear skies and a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So a cold but bright start across the southeast of England on Sunday morning, but that band of heavy rain will continue to slowly push in from the west, affecting parts of Scotland and then northern parts of England and parts of Wales with outbreaks of rain. In between, though, we will see some brighter skies, but temperatures generally around average. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Now, if you're claustrophobic in any way, shape or form, I would advise you to go and put the kettle on and maybe not listen to the next bit because it scared the life out of me. An astronaut stranded in space for 8 months has revealed she has lost the ability to perform basic tasks such as, walking. Sunita Williams made the admission during a video, that's her there, made the video during the admission during a video call with high school students, adding that she has not sat down or laid down in 8 months, obviously because of the zero gravity. Joining me now is astronomer and broadcaster Mark Thompson. Mark, hello, are you there, Mark?
Yes, I am, yes.
Yes, you are, Mark. Oh, I couldn't see you. Mark, I can see you now, which is very reassuring. Mark, this story scares the life out of me. This poor lady, she's been up there for 234 days in microgravity, and she's forgotten how to walk.
Yeah, do you know what? I'm taking that with a little bit of a pinch of salt, because astronauts on board, they have to perform about 2 hours of exercise every single day. And the reason they do that is if you're living in an environment where gravity has no effect on you, then your muscles start to weaken, your bone density starts to decrease. So if you did nothing about it, absolutely, you'd lose the ability to walk. And it's not uncommon for early space explorers to return to Earth and need to be carried because they've lost more than muscle strength to be able to do it. However, we've learned a lot since those days, and astronauts these days have treadmills with harnesses and with straps that hold them down onto the treadmill, so they do actually do 2 hours worth of resistance exercise every single day. So she hasn't forgotten, she's just lost the opportunity to walk in a normal fashion in all these months.
I mean, Sunita is actually, Harold, she's 59, and her crewmate, Barry Wilmore, who's 62, they're only supposed to spend 8 days up there. They're not coming... they went up there on June the 5th.
Yeah, they're supposed to have an 8-day mission. Unfortunately, the Boeing module that was supposed to return them to Earth had problems with thrusters and some other technical difficulties in the months that followed, which has just meant they've not been able to return. They've not been stranded. They've actually been left there on purpose. Sounds quite harsh, but they've been left there because otherwise the space station would be down on the number of people it needed to operate. So it's agreed. You know, they've not just been left there in sort of Martian-esque style. They've been left there as part of a plan. And some months ago, NASA agreed with SpaceX, with Elon Musk, to launch a mission to bring them home in March. So it's all planned. Wasn't planned to leave them there for this long, of course, but it's all been discussed and debated, and NASA have got a very robust plan to get them home again.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing that also frightens me, not just the claustrophobic, but in a very, very small space, because there's not a lot of room there, is there? Is the fact that, you know, that length of time with a small group of people, what if you start not getting on with people? How does that work?
Do you know what? I've met a couple of astronauts, lucky to have met a couple of astronauts, and they are the nicest people you could ever imagine. And one of the biggest parts of astronaut selection is to pick people that are easy to get on with, because you're absolutely right. Yeah. If you're stuck in a small tin can with people for months on end, you're going to start getting on each other's nerves potentially. They make the sort of selection process quite robust to make sure they pick people that are easy to get on with.
Yeah, no, I'm just looking nervously at my panel, thinking about being shut in a space shuttle with some of them, to be honest with you. Mark, the other story I wanted to talk to you about was this asteroid that is currently hurtling towards Earth. Some of us might think the way the Earth's going at the moment, it'd be a bit of a welcome release. I mean, what are the chances of it hitting us, and what's it going to happen?
Yeah, so there's thousands upon thousands of chunks of rock orbiting around the sun. The Earth is just a chunk of rock, or a big chunk of rock about 12,500 kilometres across, orbiting around the sun. And on occasion, some of the smaller chunks will come close to us. Now, there's a 1.3% chance of this rock hitting us in about 15 odd years, I think it's about 2032. However, it's only really quite recently been observed. And one of the challenges that astronomers have is that we need to take lots of observations of asteroids to be able to build up a really solid picture of the direction they're going to go. So I suspect, and I'm pretty confident in saying, over the coming months, we'll make more and more observations of it, and we'll find that it will miss us, and we'll be absolutely fine.
But, Mark, we've all seen these movies.
Yes, it happens.
If it doesn't sort of, like, you know, wander off and do its own thing elsewhere, do we have some sort of defence thing to stop it hurtling into the Earth?
Do you know what? I would love to say yes. Unfortunately, not really at the moment. We've all seen Bruce Willis in the movies trying to avoid catastrophe. But frankly, at the moment, there's not a lot we can do. Now, a couple of years back, in 2022, NASA launched a mission called... They launched it in 2021. It was a mission which flew into an asteroid. It literally kamikazed itself into an asteroid to see if we could deflect it from its path. Now, it was never on a trajectory to hit Earth, and we did have an impact on its path. So the research, the work so far is showing promise, but if we were to find something today that's definitely going to hit us, and we don't know of anything on its way to hit us, but if we did, there's not a lot we can do about it.
Right, just better get Bruce Willis on speed dial. Oh, and while we've got you, Mark, one final question. There was a report, vaguely thinking about it in the back of my mind, earlier on in this week, about intelligent life potentially being actually out there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, do you know what? We've found over 5,000 other planets around other star systems. So over 5,000 other planets. So we know planets are common in the universe, and we're slowly starting to find that planets that are habitable, that is, they could have the conditions to support life, are also quite common in the universe. So I think, yeah, we are going to one day find, we haven't yet, but I think it's quite on the cards that one day we will find signs of intelligent life. Whether that intelligent life is here on Earth, I think that's
I was just going to
ask. Worthy of I've stolen your joke, haven't I? Worthy of a debate there as well.
Brilliant, Mark, as always, thank you so much. And you did steal my joke. That's astronomer and broadcaster Mark Thompson. Thank you so much, very much. Now, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News. And what do you reckon? Would you go up in a space shuttle? 8 months? Sorry. With Benjamin Butterworth? Just a thought. This is GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show, including the latest new documentary we made about the King and what is Randy Andy up to now. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you soon. Don't go too far.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Lately, it's getting much better. The people getting more educated in terms of overall well-being of the skin health rather than temporary aesthetic treatments. Because most of the treatments in aesthetic, it doesn't change the texture of the skin. It just gives like volumetric result or remove the wrinkles temporarily.
So what are the most popular treatments that people are after?
According to a statistic report, first is anti-wrinkle, then dermal filler, then energy-based device. Yeah. But lately, biostimulators also became very popular. And
what do you mean by biostimulators?
Biostimulator, any substance that can change the texture of the skin, or like it will lead to postpone the aging process, or proliferate more collagen, increase the elasticity of the skin, such as polynucleotide or exosome, or different vitamins and minerals in the form of mesotherapy considered as a biostimulator.
Turkey's a particularly popular destination because the costs are so much lower. There have also been a lot of horror stories about what can happen when things go wrong, even people dying from post-surgery complications. What would you advise people?
Choose as a practitioner or surgeon very carefully and never prioritize price over quality. This is your face after all, your body after all. And mistakes can be reversible. It can be irreversible. And sometimes it's not like a booking restaurant or hotel. It's a sensitive matter that can affect their confidence and skin and body for life. So they need to choose very wisely. They need to search what kind of methodology that particular surgeon, they perform the treatments. Are they using any safety tools?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes and Co weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Programme, you can largely do what you fancy. Anyway.
Sorry, all right, OK.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm gossiping with the panel here. You're not meant to do that, evidently. You've got to be professional. I'll give it a go. Welcome to the weekend. I'm Dawn Neeson, and thank you for your company this afternoon. Really appreciating it. And, yeah, it is the 1st of February. You made it. Well done. Right, OK, let's talk royals, shall we? It's been announced that King Charles will produce a one-off documentary with Amazon that will focus on his philosophy of harmony. Me neither. The documentary coincides with the 35th anniversary of the monarch's charity, the King's Foundation, which said in a statement, "We are looking forward to sharing our mission and promote the benefits of harmony more widely as we embark on this landmark film." I actually have no idea what I've just read out there. What on earth does any of that mean? Joining me now to explain, hopefully, is royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Richard, thank you for joining me this afternoon. Lovely to see you. Now, this sounds like King Charles is doing a bit of a Harry.
Well, I can't think of anything less like the Sussexes. Harmony, our new way of looking at the world, is actually his book in 2010, and it's a philosophy of sustainability, of being at one with nature, of a revolution, an attitude towards the planet. That is the essence of it. I have it in this house. I've read it. I wouldn't call it those who are interested in the subject, I think, will find it fascinating. It's certainly not light reading. I would make that point. And this documentary apparently will have minimal appearances from the king, and the maximum amount will be given to the ideas that he has about sustainability, biodiversity, being at one with nature, and so forth.
It doesn't sound like it's going to take the traitors on in the ratings war, to be honest with you, does it?
Well, I suspect that he wouldn't be surprised to hear, the fact that it hasn't really, or wouldn't take off for a mass audience. What the idea undoubtedly behind this is to push the thoughts and the philosophy in the book. And as you know, he's an extremely thoughtful monarch, of the Prince of Wales, and it wouldn't be a case of expecting a mass audience to tune in, but it would be a case of using the fact that he was involved in it to increase the numbers who were interested and might perhaps take the ideas in it or look further. Usually it's the BBC and the ITV who do the documentaries. This is Amazon, and it's interesting to see how it fares.
OK, well, that sounds like a must-watch. I mean, I think, stay watching GB News, if I'm brutally honest with you. It's much better than everything else in any case. Right, shall we talk about Prince Andrew?
Well, I can only say with the new revelations that it's rather like an unfolding horror show, that you don't really know what's coming. Nobody knows where it's going to end. And the revelations, there are two sets. One dealing with the alleged Chinese spy Yang Tengbo, with whom he became extremely close to, it would appear. And the second one, it deals with the infamous car crash documentary. You could use any word of the English language to describe it and it wouldn't do it justice, that they gave on Newsnight with Emily Maitlis. And he made it clear in the documentary, or in the interview, that he had not been in contact with the now deceased paedophile Jeffrey Epstein after December 2010. And it seems that in February 2011, which obviously is after it, he was in touch and talking about having fun and so forth. Now, people will read, obviously, into that precisely what I do. We know that he's not been convicted of anything and he denies all charges against him. Having said that, I don't think anyone, if you look at the polls, his ratings are usually under 10%, really believes what he says.
Is he arrogant, or is he stupid, or is it a dangerous combination of both?
It's a dangerous combination of both. And I think you're absolutely right to use the word dangerous, which the Daily Mail has used, in fact, in its editorial today, because you can be dangerous to your country if you're so stupid you don't understand that, for example, you might be linking with, if you look at the correspondence, the senior courtier, one of his most senior advisors, with this alleged spy. I mean, it shows how close they were, but also giving him information about the fact that it was ill-advised to make that documentary. Well, that was hardly a state secret.
Yes.
But the fact, of course, that the Chinese watching this, they would have been watching the way he behaved in the years leading up to it. They would also have been watching how Sarah Ferguson behaves, and we remember some of that. So the whole thing, quite frankly, is It's utterly ghastly. And I mean, if he wanted to do something useful, he could do some job on the royal estates. He doesn't seem to want to. He could do something charitable. Or indeed, here's an idea, the new Donald Trump's appointee for the post at the moment undergoing Senate confirmation hearings, Mr. Patel, has emphasized that he wants to try to get to the bottom of Epstein and his network, that people should know more about it. Well, Andrew said that he'd help the FBI. He hasn't. But here is an opportunity. I bet he won't take it. But the point is, what use is he to anyone? If he attended anything other than a funeral, it would be a national scandal. And one just throws up one's hands in horror and waits for the next revelation, if there is one.
Indeed. Richard, thank you very much. That's royal commentator Richard Fitzwilliams. Thank you very much. If you're wondering why all this case comes out, by the way, it's basically there's a legal case going on that involves a former boss of Barclays Bank who was a good friend of Trump's, and the Freudian slip there, a good friend of Epstein's, and that's where it's all come out. That's where this email's come out. But the email actually said, an email from Andrew to Epstein said, keep in close touch and we'll play some more. Quick response from both of you, gentlemen. Benjamin.
I mean, of course he's arrogant and of course he's stupid. And, you know, his reputation can't get any lower. You were right in what you said earlier. But the question is, what's really important is that the king doesn't let him anywhere near royal life. He's been allowed to stay in Royal Lodge, apparently paying for it with his own millions.
Where's he get that from?
Exactly.
What?
Another valid question, and one for which the alleged Chinese spy raises questions about whether there were links for the funding.
OK. Neil, just quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't believe that he carried on, you know, contacting Epstein time and time again after all that Epstein had done. And denying it is just madness.
Yeah.
And I agree with Benjamin. The king's going to have to be very careful. And I think it's time that perhaps he made his own way
Keep
in life.
in close touch. We'll play some more. Scary stuff. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. Lots more coming up in today's show, so you don't want to go anywhere. It's packed. But it is time for the weather, because I'm thinking maybe it's getting more spring-like. Is it? Let's find out.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be often cloudy for many of us this weekend, with heavy spells of rain across the northwest later, but brighter spells will come through at times. Looking at the bigger picture, then we have this area of higher pressure out towards the east. Across the north and west, though, a squeeze in the isobars here and spells of heavy rain. But through the rest of the afternoon, we hold on to this blanket of cloud across southern parts of England, central England and into Wales. Clearer skies developing across the southeast tonight, but out towards the west, turning wet and windy across Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland. Generally mild here, but the chilly feel will be across the southeast, where we'll see a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So through Sunday morning, it is going to be a damp start across western parts of Scotland in particular, with some strong winds. Temperatures generally around 7 or 8 degrees by Sunday morning, but colder across the far south and east. A murky picture across parts of Northern Ireland, with outbreaks of rain moving into northern parts of England, into Wales and the southwest of England, but a cold and bright start across southeastern parts of England with a touch of frost. So we hold on to a good deal of sunshine across the southern parts of England as we go through Sunday. This area of rain will gradually start easing, so it's still going to produce some light rain and drizzle at times across western parts of England and Wales, but turning brighter across Northern Ireland to end Sunday afternoon. Otherwise, temperatures actually holding out at around average for the time of year. So as we go through Sunday evening, this band of rain will still continue to slowly move its way south and eastwards, holding on to the clearest skies of the southeast of England once again to give a cold start to Monday morning. We'll start to see outbreaks of rain, then sinking its way south and eastwards, but on Wednesday, higher pressure builds. Bye-bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Want to be one of 2 lucky Great British giveaway winners? That's right, you could win one of 2 prize bundles, which includes a brand new iPhone 16, £500 in shopping vouchers to spend in your favourite store, and an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. What would you spend that cash on? For a chance to win an iPhone, vouchers and £10,000 in cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of February. Congratulations, you made it through February. You've got another hour to get through with me. Thank you for your company. I'm really enjoying it. This is the weekend on GB News. Now, your headlines this hour. Trump's trade war is about to begin. The US president is hitting Mexico, Canada and China with new sanctions on their goods being imported into the United States. Will it help their economy or could it backfire? And is it coming here next? And another plane tragedy in the US as a small medical transport plane has crashed in several buildings in northeast Philadelphia. We'll have the latest on that breaking story throughout the show for you. And tributes have poured in for the very lovely Linda Nolan following her funeral earlier today. We'll be live in Blackpool to hear all about it. I'm Dawn Neeson and this is The Weekend. So thank you for your company this afternoon. I'm really, really appreciating it. Loving all your messages, even the rude ones. Keep them coming in. Love it. gbnews.com/yoursay, because this show is all about you. We've only got another hour together, so we'll make the most of it. Show, well, let's have some fun. As I said, talk about anything you want to talk about, the stories we're discussing today. gbnews.com/yoursay. Join in our conversation. It's your conversation, remember. Keeping me company this hour is a journalist and writer, Benjamin Butterworth. Don't do that. And the former Conservative MP, Neil Parish. Yeah, you can do that, that's fine. But before we get stuck into today's stories, here's the news with Sam Francis.
Dawn, thank you very much, and good afternoon to you. It's just coming up to 2 minutes past 2. We'll start in the United States. Donald Trump is set to impose tariffs on the US's top 3 trade partners today, with Mexico and Canada facing a 25% tax and Chinese imports hit with a 10% levy. The move is expected to raise prices and disrupt key sectors, including energy, automotive, lumber and agriculture. The White House insists the tariffs are aimed at tackling illegal fentanyl distribution and addressing migration concerns. In response, Canada, Mexico and China, though, have all pledged retaliation. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has warned the European Union could soon face similar measures. Thousands of Tommy Robinson supporters have arrived in Westminster for their Uniting the Kingdom demonstration this afternoon. People at the front of the march were seen carrying a banner reading "Free political prisoners and stop the isolation." The Met Police have deployed extra officers in the capital as opposing protests are set to clash. The Met Force says officers are prepared to intervene swiftly if disorder breaks out. Robinson is currently serving an 18-month prison sentence for breaching a High Court injunction. In the United States, a medical plane has crashed in a crowded Philadelphia neighbourhood, killing all 6 people on board, sadly including a young patient and her mother. The Jet Rescue Air Ambulance erupted into a fireball just 30 seconds after takeoff, engulfing several homes in flames. An investigation is now underway, with officials from the National Transportation Safety Board on the scene. It comes just days after a plane collided with a US Army helicopter near Washington, D.C., killing 64 people on a plane and 3 people on the helicopter. A second body has been found near the River Dee in the search for 2 missing sisters in Aberdeen. Eliza and Henrietta Hussey, both 32 years old, were last seen near Victoria Bridge on the 7th of January. The first body was recovered from the river on Friday morning, with the second found near the same location that evening. Formal identification is yet to take place, but their family have been informed. Police, though, say there are no apparent suspicious circumstances and inquiries are ongoing. Those are the latest headlines for now. I will be back with you hopefully in half an hour's time. We will soon find out. For now, though, it's back to Dawn.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Oh, thank you very much, Sam. I'll tell you what, he's been a real trooper today. He's not feeling too well, a bit out of the way, so fair play, young Sam there, doing a good job. Now, President Trump has confirmed his administration will impose tariffs on America's 3 biggest trading partners. Starting today, imports from Mexico and Canada will be hit with levies of 25%, while Chinese goods will face a tax of 10%. Though some products, like oil, could be spared, because Trump isn't stupid, is he? Speaking from the Oval Office, Trump hinted that Europe, or the EU, could be next in line. Here's what he had to say.
The European Union charges us 20% plus a VAT tax, called a VAT tax, very similar, and it costs us an absolute fortune. We are treated so badly, and we have a tremendous deficit with the European Union, so we'll be doing something very substantial.
Interesting. Joining me now is the chairman of Republican Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Greg, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time this afternoon. I'm not going to pour you a cocktail today, don't worry. That's between us. So what do you make of what Trump has done with these tariffs?
Well, it was somewhat predictable. He's telegraphed this for quite some time. He campaigned on it, as well as during the transition. He talked about it quite a bit. He actually dialed it down in the inaugural address. He didn't go as deep as we expected him to. He almost kind of, backed away from it. But, for the most part, he's telegraphed this rather well. Canada has had every opportunity to correct their mercantilist behavior and their culture war insanity.
What do you mean by that? What have they actually been doing that's annoyed Trump so much?
At every opportunity, Trudeau has been very critical of the U.S. For example, when Roe v. Wade was overturned with the Dobbs ruling, he's constantly, adjusting the Canadian policy to align with the Biden kind of woke culture war policy. And then when President Trump does anything, he's very critical of it. Well, Canada's completely dependent on the U.S. 30% of their exports to the U.S. Their exports to the U.S. account for 30% of Mexican GDP. For the Canadians, it's 21% of GDP. They're really dependent. And so this is an opportunity for Trudeau to just accommodate President Trump and look after his voters, his citizens. It's really outrageous that we've gotten to this point.
But there is this, the warning is, stock markets have fallen following the announcement, but the value of the dollar has jumped and gold prices hit a new record as investors react to the decision. But it does seem to be that the warning is that this will affect consumers, it's going to affect them in their pockets, inflation's going to go up. The long run is it's not going to be good news for American citizens.
There could be some costs. It's to be determined, right? There's not a lot of data on tariffs because we haven't used them that much, but the data on the tariffs from the first term suggests that there wasn't any meaningful inflation. Now, you can also consider that's because of his supply-side policies. Deregulation and tax reform might have offset some of the tariffs. But generally speaking, there's some things that are obvious, that hostility to the private sector, to job creators, and at the same time, reckless spending, that's really inflationary. That's proven. So there's a little bit of uncertainty now around tariffs. Now, markets don't like uncertainty, and that's why I think you saw some market reaction. But that's the nature of President Trump. He's not, he likes to throw a grenade in the room once in a while. I hope this works because it worked with Colombia last week when the Colombian president wouldn't take the illegal migrants who were, by the way, criminals. And also, you saw it with Mexico in the first term, where they basically put the Remain in Mexico policy in place. It worked. Biden decided to open up the borders, cancel Remain in Mexico. So, look, President Trump is just looking at Mexico and Canada and saying, there's 80 to 100,000, mostly children, dying from fentanyl poisoning every year. That's just downright homicide.
Which is the drug that is really...
That's right, coming over the Canadian border, but also coming over the Mexican border. So Americans look at this as like, maybe I will pay a little bit more for my Lululemon pants from Canada or my Mexican coffee, but I don't want a rapist living in my neighborhood. It's much more important for me, and I think President Trump, again, as usual, he's reading the voters. He knows the voters. He knows what they want.
You are a Republican, so you would say that, wouldn't you?
Sure.
Going back to what one of my panellists, Benjamin Butterworth, said earlier on when we first started this show, that he said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly, that American voters were stupid or didn't understand tariffs. What would you say to
No, they're not stupid, and that's why one of the reasons the Democrats lost is because they treated voters like they were stupid. Whether it was the trash comment by Biden or the famous deplorable comment or the gun clinging to the guns and Bibles from Obama, it's just condescending. And so what happens is voters are smart and they think with their pocketbooks. So they look back at the first term and they see peace and prosperity. And then they look at the Biden term and they see less peace and a lot less prosperity. Real wages are down 3 to 4%, depending on the metrics that you use. That's down. That's not just flat. That's down. The Obama-Biden years, they were anemic. They were up 0.5% per year. In the Trump years, they were up 2% per year, total of 8%. So, the math is the math, and voters, even the deplorables, can figure out that their paycheck is not going very far.
Do you call Benjamin a deplorable?
No, never. Never.
Benjamin, well, you've got a real-life American sitting next to you now. What would you say?
Well, of course,
seems to have grasped tariffs quite well to me.
Clearly, he's very clever because he chose to live in Britain, so that distinguishes him. Look, I think it's preposterous to suggest that. Much like most people here wouldn't. It's not something you have to think about, that the economic potential consequences of tariffs are something they would seriously understand, right? I had to sit down and read up on it once Trump started doing it. It's not to say they're stupid. It's to say that it's an unusual tactic which has not really been tested by a country like the US. There were China tariffs in the first term, but that was nothing like the scale or danger with the amount of imports that he is suggesting. And tariffs are essentially a tax. If you get into a tariff war, what tangible difference to the consumer is it than a tax? The only irony of it is that people, if they spend less money because they're buying fewer products, well, the government's getting less tax at that point too.
Right. But, Dawn, can I ask, Greg, do you think that these are sort of the large pebble going in the pond, see what happens with the waves, and then we might reverse some of it if he gets some of his way?
Of course. The tariffs won't won't be put in place right away. I'm hearing mid-February. There's always time to negotiate. If Trudeau, especially Trudeau, is smart, he will buckle on the border. He will buckle on any number of things. Nobody wants a trade war here, but there's a chance there's a trade war. There's a chance there won't be a trade war if Trudeau is smart. But there's also a chance there won't even be the tariffs, right? We saw that with Colombia last week. And so, these are used as negotiating tools. The president has thinking end game all the time. He's thinking outcomes. How he gets there is somewhat unpredictable.
Trudeau can't have much longer either.
No, and that's what's amazing is he could have resigned as prime minister. Instead, he resigned as party leader, so he thinks possibly the Liberals can come up with someone, but I don't think they have a chance.
I mean, Mark Carney, who is we know as the former governor of Bank of England,
yes, we do,
governor of Bank of Canada, and I assume the front runner to replace Trudeau. He was on BBC's Newsnight last night discussing that question, and he said we will match any tariffs the US does if he's Canadian Prime Minister in a couple of weeks' time.
And that's kind of amusing negotiating, and I don't necessarily blame him. I mean, they can't just roll over like when Trudeau went to Mar-a-Lago and lost all self-respect, and then it didn't work, by the way. So there is a moment where you have to defend your country. But the best way they can defend their country now is to accommodate President Trump on these culture war issues, but more importantly on the border.
I'm sorry, you're entitled to your conclusions on supposed culture war questions. But that's a question for the Canadian Prime Minister, for the people that Canadians repeatedly put in office. It's not for Donald Trump to tell Canada on social issues in Canada.
But look at the polling of the Canadians.
But that's for Canada, not for Donald Trump.
Well, sure, but you have to, if you're in a trade agreement, you have to look out for your citizens. Trump is looking out for Americans.
What does it have to do with trade? That Justin Trudeau, with the spirit and will of the Canadian people, has a particular view on abortion?
He doesn't have the spirit and the will of the Canadian people.
But in reality, this is real politics, and at the end of the day, Trump will exercise his, his will. And I think what will happen with the new Prime Minister, he's got to get himself in as Prime Minister of Canada. When he becomes Prime Minister, if he does, I suspect he'll take a much more liberal view then of what Trump is doing and try and negotiate. Of course. But in the meantime, he's got to stand up for Canada, otherwise he doesn't become Prime Minister.
Right, and there's definitely some politics involved here, and I don't blame Mark Carney for raising his hand. It probably hurts him with his own party if he just rolls over to everything Trump wants. But if they were truly looking out for the benefit of Canadian citizens, and there's reason that Pierre is polling so well, I could guarantee you when Pierre becomes Prime Minister, not only will he accommodate President Trump, but they, like much of the European countries now, and I wish the UK could do it, but they can't, will take a page out of the Trump playbook. Not only accommodate him, but actually try to shape their own economy around the economic policies of President Trump, which is deregulation, tax reform, and liberating the energy sector. The anti-energy climate fanaticism in Canada has hurt Canadians. The GDP per capita is down 30%. It's at 2004 levels. It's atrocious.
You better go along and see Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband, because we need the same thing here. But I don't think Benjamin's going to agree with me somewhat.
I was just going to say, Greg, do you think, I mean, Trump in that clip that we played has hinted that he might apply tariffs to the EU, not the UK, the EU. Do you think he will go ahead with that?
He'll go ahead with the threat. He might go ahead with the tariffs. Right now the tariff situation is not free and fair trade. So if you want to look for free and fair trade, and you have to use the threats of tariffs, unfortunately, that's the case right now. If the EU was smart, they would have taken care of this ahead of time. If the Canadians were smart, they would have taken care of it ahead of time. So instead, we have to use the threats of tariffs, just like we did on the president of Colombia, who wouldn't take his criminals back.
What about the UK, Greg? Do you think it will come to that point, or do we have that special relationship?
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think he's very fond of the UK, and you saw even Labour was pivoting on, they call it deregulation. I'm not sure I really believe it, but they're using the right language. And so, that's accommodating, and that looks like, an opportunity for Keir Starmer and the UK, the government in general, as well as the party, they're never going to completely, MAGA, all right? They're not going to drop net zero because their progressive voters will freak out, but they should. And if they did, they'd take some heat for it, but it would be better for the citizens of this country.
The progressive voters are fine until they had to pay for it.
Yeah, look at Germany.
You find the same in America.
Yeah.
I always say everybody's green until it costs them money, and then they aren't quite so green. That's being a little bit cynical.
Right. I mean, even Keir said
it is.
the businesses here are paying 4 times the amount of electricity for electricity in the UK.
4 times.
4 times what we're paying in the States. I've heard 5 in different moments, but 50% more than even the Germans are paying. So how is that good for the people of the UK?
Under that.
Right, we've run out of time on that one, but lots and lots of you are getting in touch saying one thing, that Trump is at least backing America. He believes in his country, and you just wish we had a little tiny weeny bit of passion for our country from our leaders. Let me know what you think. gbnews.com/your say. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story, please do go to our website, which is at gbnews.com. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News, and there's loads more coming up on the Today Show. It really is. It's packed, including the latest development on the airplane crash in the United States. All of that and more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. We'll see you very, very soon.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Jonathan, in London, we're hearing that there could be more posties from an Amazon point of view in order to limit or cut carbon emissions, but that they could put more people on foot delivering their parcels.
This is really interesting because more and more people now obviously are using Amazon and buying their shopping online or buying gifts online. And it's interesting that in London they're talking about putting their Amazon workers on foot. There are now parts of the country, I think Milton Keynes is one part of the country, where there's robots delivering parcels, or you'll see these, well, they call them robots. You'll see these little things sort of bundling down the street.
Yes.
Sort of
robots.
Yeah, I mean, technically they're a robot, but when I think of a robot, I think of a sort of
a humanoid robot.
Yeah, sort of humanoid thing, sort of Lost in Space style robot. But actually, they're sort of little sort of carriages, little
droids,
boxes,
like Star Wars droid type.
Well, they're not
thing.
even that. They're like a little sort of like a box on wheels, delivering parcels in places like Milton Keynes and other bits of the country. So I think this is just another example of how the world is changing. Online shopping is completely changing the way in which we all live our lives, the way in things.
But I think Milton Keynes lends itself to something like that. This is a newly designed town, and
exactly that's why they're in Milton Keynes.
And I really do think that a town like that really does lend itself towards a piece of tech like that. When I think back, our postie in Gloucestershire is a guy called Dave. He's fantastic. Everyone knows who he is. But I'm not sure that he could be replaced by one of these little droid things.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Oh, Breakfast with Amy and Ellie, what's not to like, and you can have lunch at the weekends with me, Dawn Neeson. And welcome. Thank you very much for your company. Now, we are staying with matters US and another aviation tragedy. This time in Philadelphia after a medical plane carrying 6 passengers, including a child, has crashed. This comes just days after an American Airlines flight collided with an Army helicopter over Washington, D.C., killing all 67 people, including many children or youngsters. Joining me now is Ella Atkins, who is an American aerospace engineer. Ella, thank you very much for joining me today. Now, obviously, 2 horrific accidents in the space of a week. Lots of people now online are saying, I'm scared to travel. But travelling by plane is actually, you're more danger getting to the airport than you are from actually flying it, as I understand it.
Yes, that's correct. We have 2 unfortunate incidents that happened in close proximity, but there's no reason to believe this trend is going to continue. Airplanes are flying every day very safely. I'm on my way right now to the airport in North Carolina in the U.S., and I will feel very safe climbing aboard and flying on my flight.
So these are, I mean, what do you make of the, firstly, of the incident in Washington? I mean, we're learning a bit more about it now, maybe as a staff shortage in the air traffic control area, but we're still, obviously, as an inquiry needs to be happening. What do you make of it?
I don't believe air traffic control was a significant factor. I believe they were doing their job. It seems to be conventional for low-flying Army helicopters that need to fly over the Potomac River because there are so many nearby buildings that are quite sensitive that we have a very busy corridor over that river with both commercial traffic coming in and out of Reagan Airport, as well as the helicopter traffic that needs to fly over the river, both for safety reasons and for noise reasons. So in this case, the helicopters are instructed to stay very low above the river so that there is a little bit of margin between them and the fixed-wing aircraft coming into Reagan Airport and coming out. In this case, the helicopter was flying too high. Furthermore, the helicopter asked the tower to maintain visual separation. The tower authorized something that they authorize every day, which is to trust the helicopter to follow the aircraft and miss them. In this case, the helicopter let them down. They let mostly the fixed-wing aircraft down as it was coming in to approach the runway. And they also let down air traffic control because they did not do what they were supposed to do, what they asked to do, which is to maintain visual separation.
And Ella, just quickly, because I know you are on your way to an airport, what do you make of Donald Trump's statement or the press conference he gave straight away, blaming the diversity hires that the Federal American Air Force administration use? What do you make of his comments?
I don't think that there's a relation. I think he was acting early without having a lot of information about the specifics of the situation. I think that what Defense Secretary Hegseth said later is more accurate, which is that it appears there were mistakes made, especially with the helicopter. And I think that it is not appropriate to immediately jump to DEI. So I do think that we're going to have a lot more information once we recover the helicopter's information. I hear we have the black box from the helicopter that has flight data. I do not yet know if we have a voice recorder from the helicopter.
Okay, and Ella, just very finally and quickly, what would you say to people now watching and listening to this show who are now, because of these 2 very close together accidents, are very nervous about getting on a plane again?
Yeah, so the second one, the Learjet in Philadelphia, that I believe you're showing footage of right now, that is unfortunate, but a more common accident. In this particular case, the Learjet appeared to taxi and take off normally from this airport, and then they did not report an emergency, but they crashed very soon after takeoff. Usually that has something to do either with an engine failure, pilot error, which could be, in fact, turning off the wrong engine, for example, when one fails, or a problem with the controls. once we have the black box from this Learjet, we'll be able to determine whether electromechanical failures were an issue or whether there was error. The fact that it descended very sharply suggests that there may have been a stall, but that stall could have been could have resulted from a number of reasons.
Yeah, just a horrible accident. Ella, thank you very much for joining us today. That's Ella Atkins, who is an American aerospace engineer. Thank you very much. And safe flight. Thank you very much. OK, now, we still have Greg Swenson with us. Greg, two horrific accidents in America recently.
Yeah.
The one that's obviously the private jet, horrible because it was a little girl who'd just been receiving treatment, was flying home to Mexico. Horrible, but I think we accept the tragedy. What I wanted you to talk about was Donald Trump's reaction to what we saw happened in Washington with the crash between the Black Hawk helicopter and the jet, carrying many young ice skaters. Again, tragic loss of very young life. But Donald Trump was straight in there blaming the FAA for diversity hires. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it was aggressive, but that's just President Trump. He's disruptive, he's aggressive, he's provocative. He's brought up a really good point. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to use tragedies to bring up the point. It's something that he was very deliberate about in the first week of his administration. He filed, or he had an executive order putting an end to this insane DEI madness and nonsense. And what he did, basically what they were saying is, stop judging people by the color of their skin, and it should be merit-based. And this is very, very topical right now because there's a class action lawsuit from 900 former students who had passed all this great training.
To be air traffic controllers.
Yeah, at their universities, and so they were denied entry into the pool of applicants because it wasn't diverse enough.
Because basically the white men, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so not only is it unfair and racist against those candidates, but it's also unsafe for Americans. And once again, we're talking about the safety of your citizens. President Trump doesn't care about the optics of him being aggressive on air. Yeah, people would like to see a little Ronald Reagan, like with the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster in '86, and he had a great speech. That's nice, but right now people care about things that are important to
So you weren't
citizens.
offended, you weren't upset by the fact that, we didn't even know the names of the youngsters that had perished in that. You weren't upset that Donald Trump said, I'm really sorry, this is a horrible accident, but I'm blaming diversity.
I care more about outcomes as well, and I think President Trump does too. And what he is addressing is a tragedy. And it's a tragedy that there are air traffic controllers who shouldn't be air traffic controllers because they were put in place because of DEI.
Thank you. Neil, what did you make of what you heard Donald Trump say after that accident?
Yeah, I mean, I think any loss of life is tragic, but I can understand with this class action going on in America that you have a real problem. And I think, we're going to have to be careful here that while we want to have a diverse workforce, we just want to make sure that the most able are able to apply for those jobs. And I think this is what's obviously happened in America. And I think, yes, Donald Trump, you wouldn't make him a diplomat, would you? And you wouldn't put him in the Foreign Office unless you wanted war. But seriously, he goes straight to the point, and he does have a point. And I think he's also, rowed back a bit from his position now. But I think I can understand why Americans, with this action going on, would actually support President Trump. From us not knowing all of this, it looked a very crass comment, to be honest with you, and that was my reaction to it straight away. But I think when you dig down into it, there's a much bigger issue, and I think, dare I say it, one that we can learn in this country as well.
Benjamin, you've heard about the lawsuit and what's going on behind this. Do you understand more why Donald Trump said what he said?
No, I think the moral abyss of a man who looks at a tragedy where the bodies haven't even been identified and then tries to play those innocent people's deaths into a political campaign. It doesn't matter what the political campaign is. That is sick. That is sick. There will be families among those inevitably 64 dead who will have voted and supported Donald Trump. I suspect they didn't appreciate that as yet identified dead relative being put into this question. As it turns out, the helicopter was, I think, 3 white men and a white woman. So that doesn't suggest they had anything to do with DEI. There was absolutely no evidence. If it comes out in future, then you have the valid reference. But to try and justify that, to try and defend putting the deaths of innocent people in a tragedy for which we knew nothing is sick.
Yeah, but...
And it terrifies us all, the cult of Donald Trump, that people like you will come out here and defend that
because people,
without justification.
Because, Benjamin, people like you have been saying this for years, and this is one of the reasons that he won, because of that condescension. What people care...
It's not condescending. It's condescending to speak ill of a situation which has just killed innocent people.
You see, I think
he's not in...
If I could come in...
He's not in office.
Please. Dare I come in to defend President Trump in this issue? I think what he's done is he's hit on what has been a major issue in America, which has potential to cause problems. And yes, it wasn't, you know, he probably didn't think necessarily about the feelings of those people and those families that died. But what he was doing was hitting at a much bigger issue. And I think that's where perhaps we in this country don't actually understand some of the psychic behind President Trump, because we see him sort of just too blunt. But if you look right into it, I can understand why a lot of Americans would actually support, you believe, Greg, what he did.
And we've gone from Trump derangement syndrome, which is alive and well.
No, which is what you have. Hold on, which is what you have, to sit there and justify putting innocent people's dead bodies and justify it because Donald Trump said it. Trump derangement syndrome is people accepting any moral abyss that Donald Trump says just because Donald Trump said it.
Actually,
I feel that's sick
it's
in
interesting.
The head.
It's interesting, and I know that people like you have been saying this since his first term.
Are you going to detract from the actual question?
No, I'm getting to that.
Politicising dead people.
I know, but really, what you have to think about is the outcomes, right? And if President Trump has elevated this issue, and if more people are aware of it, all the better. If you want to do your DEI stuff, do it in the...
The problem isn't DEI, the problem is DJT. But that's the thing that's
really,
the issue.
So why don't you... I can understand DEI like in the class department at Brown or at Oxford. There's no harm from that, right? It's unfair to the white applicants or male applicants, but it's not going to harm anybody. But DEI in public safety, like in aviation, in medicine, where doctors are being promoted based on DEI quotas, is dangerous. So you can cry all you want about President Trump.
There was no evidence, and there certainly was no evidence hours after the crash that was in any way related to what had happened. And so that is sick.
We don't know that.
That is sick. That you have a situation whereby any accident can happen in the US, any tragedy, and you just blame black people being hired.
One at a time.
There's no point in going on about how sick it is. What you've got to do
But it is sick, right?
You've got to deal with the situation of what's actually happening. And like I said, not only is it happening in America, but it's also happening here. And it's no good for the left just to go on and on about we have got to have diversity. Yes, we have.
But it's got nothing
we've
to do with
also
what
got to
happened.
have the best person for the job and the safest person for the job. And it's no good for you just to rant and rave about the fact...
I'm not ranting. I'm speaking up for the families who probably didn't want to be part of this row.
What Donald Trump said...
If your kid, God forbid, died in this situation, do you think you'd appreciate a politician making political capital out of your child's death?
But I would want to know...
You have no moral boundary.
You have still got to take...
word to Greg.
This is a disease.
I think they would be worried about whether DEI had an effect on morale in the federal
there's no evidence
agency.
it did.
Oh, there's definitely there's definitely
anybody involved in this crash.
No, because
was there because of such a system.
I didn't say that. Listen,
so I said
let Greg finish. Just very
I'm talking about morale in the aviation department with these air traffic controllers. That is down. Same with the Army, the military. Recruiting is down significantly because of DEI. That's dangerous for American citizens, just like Trudeau is dangerous for Canadian citizens.
Okay, and on that note, I have to leave it. I'm really sorry, because, I mean, I could have listened to you three talk about this one all day. It's the most astonishing story. Greg Swenson, thank you very much, Chairman of Republican Overseas. Wow, I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News. Up next, we speak to one female activist who argues that not enough Muslim women are allowed to reject wearing the hijab. Another controversial subject for you. All that and much more coming up. This is GB News. We'll see you very soon. Don't go too far.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. This weekend is going to be often cloudy for many, rain at times in the northwest, but we will see occasional brighter spells coming through. We have a ridge of higher pressure towards the south that brings settled conditions, but across the northwest, a squeeze in the isobars and some frontal systems as well. So through the rest of the afternoon, then we hold on to this blanket of cloud across central parts of England towards the southeast as well. Could be thick enough for some patchy drizzle at times. Across Northern Ireland and Scotland, cloudy here with some light rain and drizzle, but in between there will be a slither of sunshine across Wales and Northern England. Otherwise, temperatures generally around average, but chilly underneath the low cloud. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, you can see some frontal systems out towards the west. But across Scotland tonight, holding on to cloudy skies, still with some rain at times and some gales, especially across the Outer Hebrides. A murky picture across Northern Ireland as well, with outbreaks of rain and drizzle. A slither of clear skies across Wales and northern parts of England, but hold on to a lot of cloud elsewhere. Now, as we go through Saturday evening, we start to see this band of heavy rain moving in from the west, so turning increasingly wet and windy across Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland, holding on to a lot of cloud elsewhere, but we start to see some drier air coming up from the near continent. So across the southeast in particular, it will be turning colder with clear skies and a touch of frost to start Sunday morning. So a cold but bright start across the southeast of England on Sunday morning, but that band of heavy rain will continue to slowly push in from the west, affecting parts of Scotland and then northern parts of England and parts of Wales with outbreaks of rain. In between, though, we will see some brighter skies, but temperatures generally around average. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Oh, Lordy, welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you for your company this afternoon. Really enjoying it. It's a cracking show, isn't it? You can catch up as well, by the way, by going to the website. But there is plenty more coming up on today's show. But before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana Akua has joined us in the studio. Nana's show starts at 3 o'clock, and it's always a smashing one. So, Nana, what you got for us today?
Well, I'm back from the northeast. I was in North Shields yesterday. We were talking about Brexit. It was Brexit Day 5 years on. A lot of people pretty annoyed at the way Brexit has been handled. So my monologue, my niggle, will be tackling that head on and how useless our politicians have been in enacting policies that we want them to act and act in their own self-interest, which is one of my thoughts as to why Brexit is a failure. But that'll be in my niggle later on. Plus, Nigel Farage will be live on the show. He's at a conference. He's at another one of his Reform UK conferences as Reform appear to be going ahead of the Labour Party in terms of popularity. So can they actually, potentially, win the next general election. Plus, I've got somebody from Just Stop Oil on, and I'm talking to them because I want to talk to them properly about they're not doing any protests or anything like this today, as far as we know. So I thought it'd be good to actually talk to them and say, what is it that you want, seeing as Ed Miliband is going crazy on net zero, and we're doing pretty much everything on their manifesto. So why don't they just shut up shop and just get on with their lives? That's
obviously going to be a very fiery show. It always is with Nana. Don't get away with anything with her. Thanks very much, Nana. That's at 3 o'clock, so you don't want to miss that one. Well, don't go anywhere. Just stay company with us all day. Right, now, today is World Hijab Day, where both Muslim and non-Muslim women in around 140 countries are urged to wear the traditional headscarf for a day. However, one author is encouraging women to do the exact opposite and take their hijabs off, as she considers it a symbol of female oppression. I'm now joined by the author of Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam, Yasmin Mohammed. Yasmin, always a joy to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us today. So tell us a bit more about what you want to achieve from today.
Well, Dawn, to tell you the honest truth, there's no way I could ask women to remove their hijabs on No Hijab Day. Women can go around, Islamists can go around and encourage women to wear the hijab on Hijab Day, and I understand that's what they're doing, but I can't do the polar opposite of that and ask women to take their hijabs off, because I know that that's putting those women's lives in danger. Not just honor killings and honor violence, but they could end up getting imprisoned, they could end up getting killed. And so I would never do that. So what I'm doing instead is I'm asking people to support the women who are fighting against the hijab, to support the women who do not want to have to wear this tool of misogyny, because it is forced upon women all across the globe. And I have to make one more point very clear. The hijab is just a symbol. It's just a tool. It's just the tip of the iceberg. What's important to note is how the women are treated in all of these communities, right? So we see the shackles on a slave, and we recognize that's just the physical representation of slavery. But that's not telling you the whole story. It's not even telling you the beginning of the story. There's so much more, right? And that's what this day is all about, to bring awareness to all of those issues.
I mean, Yasmin, you're incredibly vocal on social media about how women are forced in certain regimes, I mean, Iraq and Afghanistan, some of the countries you've mentioned, about how women are forced not just to wear the hijab, but to literally walk around in shrouds. So you're very vocal about this. What reaction do you get from people?
Well, it's unfortunately surprisingly ignorant. And I think that has a lot to do with the propaganda from the Islamists for so long that have been pushing this idea that the hijab is empowering, that the hijab is some sort of feminism and things like that. The truth is, hijab separates the good, clean women from the filthy, dirty whores, right? And that's with Muslims. So just imagine with non-Muslims, how they see them, right? How they view non-Muslim women. In the UK, you're very aware of how these men view non-Muslim women and how they treat them with such disdain. And that's because they have this ideology, this belief that if a woman is not covered in hijab, if she's not protecting herself from these predators, then she's asking for it. What they're not recognizing is the irony here, which is that they are the filth. Right? That women need to protect themselves from them, instead of them looking at themselves and figuring out in their societies, why do we have so many rapists? Why are so many of our men predators? Why do we have something called taharrush in countries like Egypt that gets spread into Germany and the UK and Italy? You know, and that's that gang just assaulting of women when they go around them like a pack of hyenas. Why is this part of your cultures? Why is this happening in your countries? Think about that. Acknowledge that. Speak to your boys and your men about that, instead of shrouding women and basically wrapping them up in a death shroud while they're still breathing, because you don't know how to interact with women in civil society.
And Yasmin, I'm pretty sure, I mean, considering some of the instances we have seen where women have been treated poorly and sexually assaulted and raped because of how they choose to dress in Western society, have you had any personal threats about your attitude about empowering women?
Oh, Dawn, daily. Absolutely. You know, some of it is public, a lot of it is public, and some of it is private, and it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous for me and my family. You might have heard of a man named Salwan Momaka in Sweden who was just killed yesterday, shot in the head as he was live streaming. So he is a man, he's a Christian man whose family were all killed by ISIS, and he spent his life trying to bring attention to this ideology and how dangerous it is to everybody. And for that, he was shot in the head. So obviously, anybody who speaks up, anybody who tries to speak of their own experiences and their own trauma, we are all in danger. But we can't keep quiet, because over on the East, they will kill us for it. Over in the West, they'll call us Islamophobes for it. So who's left to speak? You know, we feel like we are compelled, we have no choice. Obviously, we'd rather not. We'd rather people would get it and understand. I mean, it's perfectly obvious. It seems like mind-boggling that we have to even do this work. But unfortunately, we do. There's so many people that are, the cowardice, unfortunately, overrides their sense of self-preservation.
Yasmin, thank you very much for joining us. Always appreciate talking to you, and keep up with the work you do. Thank you very much. That's Yasmin Mohammed there, author of Unveiled: How Western Liberals Empower Radical Islam. OK, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News. Up next, we'll look at the tributes pouring in for Linda Nolan at her funeral today. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. I'll see you soon.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done that they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. Oh, my hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the weekend with me, Dawn Neeson. Thank you for your company today. Now, the funeral of singer and TV personality Linda Nolan took place at St Paul's Church in Blackpool today. She passed away a couple of weeks ago at the age of 65 after a long battle with cancer. Famous faces such as Kerry Katona, Paul Chuckle and John Coghlan were there amongst those who attended her funeral to pay their respects to the late star. We're joined now by GB News reporter Jack Carson to tell us how it went. Jack, thank you for joining us. Obviously a very sad occasion, but an amazing lady, an amazing family. How did it go today?
Well, it was very emotional for the members of the family and the public who attended the funeral of Linda Nolan today here in Blackpool, where she very much made it her home. Queen of Blackpool is how she was described to us today. Queen of the North by some of those who knew her a bit more closely because of just her fantastic attitude to life, even though she may have struggled with cancer in the last years of her life. Her spirit remained on. Her formidable spirit, we've been told today, was just infectious at times. She wanted to be known as someone who was living with cancer, not dying with cancer. And the legacy that she leaves has been shown today just simply by the amount of members of the public who turned up today. Hundreds lined the street to applaud as her pink and glittery coffin was taken out of the hearse. That was one of her last requests, to go out in pure showbiz style. She will be remembered so fondly. Sarah Louise Robertson, who helped write her Cancer Diaries book, spoke to us earlier on and gave this tribute.
Linda became a friend of mine when I was writing her Cancer Diaries, and for me, Linda was just this formidable force of nature. She was an incredibly warm, loving, generous-spirited, generous-hearted, positive ray of light and sunshine, and that's how I'll remember her always. She just brought something so special. Some people just have stardust naturally, and Linda Nolan just was stardust through and through, and today's service was such a reflection of who she really was as a person.
Well, there you go. You can hear there just how much really Linda Nolan meant to so many people. In her eulogy, Denise Nolan Anderson said that there were so many friends gathered there today who simply adored her, and she said how really brave she was, not only to, of course, go through that cancer diagnosis with such positivity, but also, of course, raise so much money for cancer research as well. Dermot McNamara was her agent. He spoke to us as well.
It was exactly what she wanted. She was very, very particular about what she wanted. She wanted the white doves, her glittery pink coffin, and all of her loved ones all around her. And of course, the fans as well. So many fans came from all over the country, also other countries too, Japan, New Zealand, to pay their respects to Linda. And it's exactly what she wanted. And she was, she was a beacon of light for a lot of people. I represented her for years, and I learned a lot. And she was, she was a client, but also a friend. And it was, I will always treasure those moments.
Well, you heard there from Dermot just how much Linda means, and from Sarah earlier on as well. In really simply, as we heard in the funeral, Linda would have loved all the fuss today. She leaves behind such a strong legacy, and her spirit will remain on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Jack. A very touching tribute there. And God rest Linda and her family. I knew her a little bit, and she was a lovely, lovely lady who fought very hard against an awful disease. And while I'm on the subject of that disease, prostate cancer has now overtaken breast cancer as the most common cancer in the UK. So, boys, get checked. I've been Dawn Neeson. This is GB News. Thank you very much to Neil and to Benjamin. Don't go anywhere. There's plenty more coming up on GB News. Nana's coming up at 3 o'clock. And at 6 o'clock, it's a Saturday 5. But first, it's the weather. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be often cloudy for many of us this weekend, with heavy spells of rain across the northwest later, but brighter spells will come through at times. Looking at the bigger picture, then we have this area of higher pressure out towards the east. Across the north and west, though, a squeeze in the